Imagine silence. Not the kind of silence that falls over a city late at night, or the silence of an empty house. Imagine a different kind of silence, the cosmic kind. Over 50 years of near absolute stillness. After Eugene Cernan left the last footprint in the lunar dust of the Taurus-Littrow Valley in December of 1972, the moon once again became a distant, silver disk in our night sky. A symbol of a triumph we somehow chose not to repeat. For decades, we talked about going back. We drew up plans, sketched concepts for bases, argued over budgets, but it was all just background noise, a slow burning dream. The moon waited patiently, and then, almost overnight, everything changed. The silence was broken. It was shattered by the deafening roar of rocket engines, a barrage of press releases, and a flood of ambitious declarations. The race was on again. But this wasn't the elegant duel between two superpowers we remember from black and white newsreels. This was a furious, multilateral stampede. NASA, with its Artemis program, promised to land the first woman and the next man on the South Pole. China's National Space Administration, with its series of Chang'e missions, was already bringing lunar soil back to Earth and preparing for its own crewed station. Russia, dusting off old Soviet-era blueprints, announced plans for a joint lunar base with China. India, with its Chandrayaan mission, was stubbornly aiming for the same polar regions. Europe, Japan, private companies. Everyone suddenly remembered the moon. From our screens, a torrent of beautiful, carefully crafted words washed over us. Resources, scientific discovery, a stepping stone to Mars, the future of humanity. The official version was as flawless as a polished telescope lens. We were told this was a new era of space exploration, driven by technological progress and economic viability. They talked about helium-3, an isotope that could fuel the fusion reactors of the future, and of which the moon supposedly holds millions of tons. They talked about water ice, locked in the permanent shadows of polar craters, a source not only of water for colonists, but of rocket fuel that could be produced on site. They talked about national prestige, about geopolitical dominance in the 21st century. It all sounded logical, persuasive, and perfectly reasonable. But there was one problem. One small, almost imperceptible detail that didn't fit into this brilliant picture. They were all in a hurry as if something was chasing them. The true reason for this feverish rush had nothing to do with helium or ice or Mars. It was tied to another event, an event that happened almost simultaneously with this sudden lunar awakening. In deep space, far beyond the orbit of Neptune, the Pan-STARRS panoramic survey system detected a faint, barely discernible object. It was given a standard designation, 3I Atlas, the third interstellar visitor ever recorded. Officially, a comet. But from the very beginning, something was wrong with it. Its trajectory, its behavior, they were strange. But back then, in those early days, no one connected the distant cosmic wanderer with the sudden frenzy at our doorstep. A coincidence? Or is it choreography, playing out on a scale we are only just beginning to comprehend? The official story says it's a coincidence. But we're not here to listen to official stories. We're here to analyze the data. And the data tells a very different story. Let's accept the official version for a moment. Let's immerse ourselves in its logic, feel its weight. The system, that impersonal conglomerate of government agencies, scientific institutions, and media corporations, offers us a neat and tidy picture of the world. In this picture, humanity, after a long pause, has finally matured enough for the next leap into space. The Apollo program was a miracle, but a political one, dictated by the Cold War. It was incredibly expensive and technologically risky. After the race was won, interest faded and funding dried up. The 50 years that followed, they explain, were spent waiting for technology to catch up with ambition. New materials appeared, more efficient engines, advanced robotics, artificial intelligence capable of guiding a landing with a precision no human could match. The private sector, led by SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others, dramatically lowered the cost of lifting cargo into orbit. The moon transformed from a symbolic prize into an economically attractive asset. This is the official narrative. And it makes sense. They show us colorful presentations about the concept of ISRU, in situ resource utilization. This is the key idea. Don't haul everything from Earth. Produce it locally. From the lunar regolith, they explain, you can 3D print building blocks for bases that shield against radiation. From the water ice, of which according to data from the LRO, there could be billions of tons in the polar craters, you can get not only drinking water and breathable oxygen, but also, through electrolysis, hydrogen and oxygen, components of high-efficiency rocket fuel. The moon, in this paradigm, becomes not just a destination, but a giant cosmic gas station, a pit stop on the way to Mars and beyond. And helium-3? Oh, that's the cherry on top. An isotope that is virtually absent on Earth but has accumulated in abundance in the upper layers of the lunar soil over billions of years of bombardment by the solar wind. Theoretically, it could become the fuel for clean, safe fusion energy. A single shuttle load of helium-3, as futurists love to repeat, could power the entire United States for a full year. Prestige, science, economics, the future. All of the systems arguments sound solid. They appeal to our reason, to our desire for progress. They create the impression of a logical, natural, and long overdue process. And that is their greatest strength. They make us believe that this sudden race is merely the next predictable step in human history. But what if it isn't a step, but a leap? A panicked sprint in one, very specific direction. To see the first crack in this monolithic facade, we don't need classified documents or insider information. All we need is a map. A simple map of the near and far sides of the moon. And a little patience. Let's plot all the declared and projected landing sites onto it. Here's the Artemis program's area of interest. The South Pole, Shackleton Crater, rich in ice. Logical. Here are several potential sites for China's Chang'e 7 and Chang'e 8 missions, also near the South Pole. Also logical. Here are promising zones for Indian and Russian probes. They too are looking at the polar regions. It all adds up. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is what's on the surface, what's being discussed in the news. Now let's add data from less public sources. Let's analyze flight plans that have leaked online, study the ballistic calculations that enthusiasts post on specialized forums. Let's track the contracts that NASA and other agencies are signing with private companies for cargo delivery. And the picture begins to change. Slowly, but irreversibly. New points appear. Many new points. And they aren't scattered across the resource-rich poles. They aren't on the convenient, easy-to-contact near side of the moon. They are clustered in a dense, unnatural group in one single, unremarkable region on the far side. The place doesn't even have a prominent name. It's on the edge of the South Pole Aitken Basin, a giant impact crater, but not in its most geologically interesting areas. It's just a stretch of hilly plains, dotted with nameless craters. No anomalous ice deposits, no unique minerals according to orbital spectral analysis. Communication with Earth here is only possible via a relay satellite. It's inconvenient, expensive, and devoid of any apparent sense. And yet, it is precisely here, to this lunar backwater, that the trajectories of future missions are pointing. Not one, but several. American, Chinese, and, judging by some indirect data, Russian. They are all flying to the same place while pretending their destinations are hundreds of kilometers away. They are in a race where the finish line is hidden from the entire world. And this is where the official version starts to crack. Because no economic rationale, no scientific curiosity can explain this strange, silent consensus. This doesn't look like a competition for resources. This looks like a desperate attempt to be the first to reach something that lies in that dust. And when we ask the system a direct question, why this region, we get an answer. Of course we do. The system always provides answers. We are told it is a region with unique landing conditions, that the combination of terrain, illumination, and soil stability makes it optimal for testing new soft landing technologies, that its geology, though not spectacular on spectrograms, is of special interest for studying mantle rocks ejected by the Aitken impact. It sounds scientific, reassuring, but it's a lie. And we can prove it because the moon has been mapped better than the floors of Earth's oceans. We have terabytes of data from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter with its LOLA laser altimeter, which has scanned the surface with a precision of tens of centimeters. And this data screams that the chosen region is no better and no worse than thousands of other similar regions all over the moon. There is nothing optimal about it. There's nothing unique about it. It just is. The same as millions of square kilometers around it. The official explanation is a smokescreen. Informational noise created to make us stop asking questions. But we won't stop. Because when several of the world's most powerful nations secretly converge on a single point on a map, a point devoid of any obvious value, it's no longer a matter of science or economics. It's a matter of security and of truth. What lies there, on the far side of the moon, at the point where all the invisible threads of the new space race converge? And what does a distant interstellar wanderer named 3I Atlas have to do with it? To find the answer, we have to become digital archaeologists. We need to descend into the deep, dusty archives of the space age. Imagine these archives. They are not grand halls with parchment scrolls. They are giant, soulless server farms scattered across the globe. NASA's Planetary Data System, the European Space Agency's Science Archive, digitized Soviet archives. Millions of files, petabytes of information accumulated over 60-plus years. It is both a cemetery of dead missions and a repository of the greatest discoveries. And somewhere in this endless ocean of zeros and ones, there must be a key. Our first thought, of course, was the obvious one. We started searching for direct mentions of anomalies in the designated quadrant. We used every possible keyword: magnetic anomaly, gravity anomaly, unexplained radiation, strange geological formation. We sifted through data from dozens of orbiters, from the American lunar orbiters of the 60s to the modern LRO. We analyzed radar maps, gravity maps, elemental distribution maps created from spectrometry. The result was zero. Absolute, deafening emptiness. Digital silence. The region that so desperately drew the world's powers looked virginally clean in the official data. Nothing. This was the first and most crucial confirmation. If there is something there, the data about it was either never published, or more likely, meticulously scrubbed. The system wasn't just creating a smokescreen of convenient explanations. It was actively building an architecture of silence, removing any hint of the true nature of this place. That realization changes the game. We understood we were looking for the wrong thing in the wrong place. It's useless to look for a needle in a haystack if someone has already gone over it with a giant magnet. We had to change our approach. If we can't find data about the place itself, maybe we can find data from something that passed by, some accidental witness, a digital ghost from the past, whose telemetry was simply forgotten or deemed too insignificant to clean up. Our search shifted from geological maps to mission maps. We began compiling a chronological list of everything that had ever flown over this region, or landed nearby. The list wasn't very long. The far side of the moon has always been less popular. Orbiters swept over it, taking pictures and measurements, but we had already checked their data. Useless. We needed probes that had been on the surface. Probes that could have felt something that wasn't visible from orbit. And it was here, while reviewing old Soviet programs, that we found it. Lunokhod 2. That name means little to most people today. In the shadow of the American Apollo missions, the Soviet lunar program often seems like a series of failures. But that's not true. The Lunokhod program was an absolute triumph of engineering. Imagine, the early 70s, no microprocessors, no GPS, no autonomous navigation systems. And the Soviet Union lands an 8-wheeled rover the size of a small car on the moon and drives it in real time from Earth. A crew of 5, a commander, a driver, a flight engineer, a navigator, and a high-gain antenna operator, sat in a secret control center and, looking at grainy black and white images from TV cameras, guided this machine across an unknown world. The signal delay was about 3 seconds. It was meticulous, incredibly stressful work. Lunokhod 1 in 1970 became the first planetary rover in history and operated for almost a year, traveling over 10 kilometers. But Lunokhod 2, launched in January of 1973, was a true masterpiece. It was faster, more maneuverable, and its scientific instruments were far more advanced. It landed on the eastern edge of Mare Serenitatis in the Le Monnier crater and began its journey. In 4 months, it did incredible work. It traveled 37, or according to some revised data, 42 kilometers, a record that stood unbroken for 40 years until it was surpassed by the Mars rover Opportunity. It transmitted over 80,000 television images and hundreds of panoramas to Earth. It performed chemical analysis of the soil, measured the brightness of the lunar sky, and conducted laser-ranging experiments with a French-made retroreflector. It was a resounding success. And it ended abruptly. On May 9th, 1973, Lunokhod 2 accidentally drove into a small, fresh crater. While backing out, its open solar panel lid, according to the official version, scooped up some lunar dust, or regolith. This dust settled on the cooling radiator. During the long 2-week lunar night, the rover cooled down as it should. But when the sun rose and it was time to open the radiator again for cooling, the dust on it played a fatal role. Instead of reflecting heat, it began to absorb it. The vehicle started to overheat. Communication grew weaker, and finally, on June 3rd, it was officially announced that the mission was over. This story always seemed too simple, too mundane. A great exploratory machine that had withstood cosmic radiation and vacuum, defeated by a handful of dust. But back then, at the height of the Cold War, no one would ask too many questions. The mission was complete, the triumph was declared, end of story. But we were looking at the map of its final route, and it took our breath away. In its final weeks, Lunokhod 2 was moving south towards a mountainous region. It was driving along the very edge of the exact area that interested us. It didn't go deep inside, but it was close. Close enough. If there was something there that could leave a trace in the data, Lunokhod 2 should have felt it. The most difficult part of our investigation began. Finding the raw telemetry data from Lunokhod 2 is an almost impossible task. A large part of the Soviet archives remains classified or has simply been lost over the decades. What has been digitized and made public is mostly images and general mission reports. We needed the raw, unprocessed data streams from the scientific instruments. Second by second, we spent weeks scouring the repositories of space research institutes, corresponding with space enthusiasts on private forums, and translating old technical documents. And finally, luck smiled on us. We found what we were looking for in the most unexpected place, on the server of an American university. Some graduate student in the 90s, as part of a cooperative program, had gained access to a portion of the Soviet archives for his dissertation on planetary geology, and he had uploaded the raw data to his public directory. There it lay for almost 30 years, forgotten by everyone, covered in digital dust. It was a set of files in an obsolete binary format, without documentation. It took us several more days, and the help of a data processing specialist to write a script that could decipher this gibberish. And then, one night, graphs appeared on the screen. It was the telemetry from the last days of Lunokhod 2's operation. Temperature, onboard voltage, spectrometer readings, and data from the magnetometer and the RIFMA radiation detector. At first, everything was normal. The numbers were boring and predictable. The moon's magnetic field is virtually non-existent, so the magnetometer showed only weak fluctuations caused by the solar wind. The radiation background was also stable, a constant stream of galactic cosmic rays. We scrolled through hour after hour, day after day, and then we saw it. It was a sharp, implausible spike. A perfect, almost vertical peak on both graphs simultaneously. For a few minutes, as the rover moved through a specific area, the magnetometer readings shot up hundreds of times, from background values of a few dozen nanoteslas to nearly 37,000. That's comparable to the Earth's magnetic field at the surface. On the moon, where there is no liquid core and no atmosphere to protect it. At the same time, the RIFMA instrument recorded a spike in the radiation background. Not as dramatic as the magnetic field, but still significant. 2 to 3 times higher than normal. And then, when the rover had moved just a few hundred meters away from that point, both readings just as sharply returned to their usual values. It was like walking down a quiet, sleeping street and for one moment stepping into the epicenter of a deafening rock concert, only to be back in the silence a step later. This did not look like a natural phenomenon. This looked like passing by a working device. The first thought that comes to any scientist or engineer is equipment failure. Perhaps the instruments just went haywire. It's plausible, especially for 50-year-old technology. But 2 facts argued against this theory. First, the spike was recorded by 2 completely different independent instruments, the magnetometer and the radiation detector. The probability of both of them failing in perfect sync and then fixing themselves just as synchronously is infinitesimally small. Second, the shape of the signal itself. It wasn't random noise or the white noise characteristic of a malfunction. It was a clear, structured peak that rose and fell as the vehicle moved. It was consistent with measuring a real, physical field with clear boundaries in space. Okay, let's rule out malfunction. What then? The second and most obvious explanation for any magnetic and radiation storm in the solar system is our sun, a powerful solar flare. A coronal mass ejection could easily explain such readings. It's the simplest, most logical and safest explanation. Occam's razor in all its glory. But we had to check. And we did. We pulled up the archives of solar activity data for May of 1973. We studied reports from ground-based observatories, data from the few spacecraft that were already monitoring the sun back then. The result was unequivocal. On that day, during that week, there were no significant events on the sun. It was relatively quiet. No X-class flares capable of causing such a reaction. No proton storms. The system's official explanation, had it known about this data, would have collapsed before it could even form. This was not a solar storm. This was not an instrument failure. This was something local, something on the moon. Or even more alarmingly, under it. Something that was generating a powerful magnetic field and elevated radiation levels, and Lunokhod 2, driving by, had accidentally clipped the edge of this field with its sensitive instruments. Now let's go back to the official cause of its demise. Dust on the radiator. Doesn't that version seem suspiciously convenient now? What if the rover didn't just overheat? What if a powerful electromagnetic pulse from this anomalous source simply fried its unshielded electronics? Or what if the operators on Earth, seeing these shocking, impossible readings on their consoles, received an order to terminate the mission immediately? To drive the rover into the nearest crater, stage an accident, and bury this secret forever along with it? We can't prove it. But now, the hypothesis of a cover-up no longer seems so paranoid. It seems logical. For 50 years, this secret slept in old Soviet archives. For 50 years, no one knew that a small Soviet robot, without realizing it, had stumbled upon the most important discovery in human history. It found the X that marks the spot where the treasure is buried. And now, half a century later, all the world powers, having presumably obtained some new data from orbit that allowed them to pinpoint the center of this anomaly, have rushed to this spot. They are no longer searching blindly. They know where to go. The Soviet rover accidentally stumbled upon the edge of something that had been sleeping in the lunar dust for 50 years. And now, it seems, it has begun to wake up. And the race to be the first to awaken it has already begun. So, we have two pieces of the puzzle, two torn fragments of a map, found in different corners of the world 50 years apart. The first piece is the anomaly, a localized, unnaturally powerful magnetic field on the far side of the moon, accidentally discovered by a doomed Soviet rover. This is the place. The second piece is the race, an inexplicable, feverish rush by all leading space powers to this very place, disguised by plausible pretexts of a resource competition. This is the action. Any investigator will tell you that when you have a place and an action, you're missing just one element to complete the picture. You need the motive, or in our case, the catalyst. What was the trigger that turned sluggish plans for lunar exploration into a sprint with an invisible finish line? What forced the system to act so hastily and in such a coordinated fashion? The answer, as we now understand, was not on the moon. It was flying towards it from the interstellar darkness. Let's return to our third interstellar visitor, the object 3I Atlas. From the moment of its discovery, it was strange. Astronomers are used to comets. They are dirty snowballs, chunks of ice and rock that begin to heat up as they approach the sun. The ice sublimates, turning into gas, which erupts into space, dragging dust along with it. This forms the coma, a cloud of gas and dust around the nucleus, and the famous tail. The behavior of comets is well understood. It obeys the laws of celestial mechanics and thermodynamics. But Atlas did not fit this model. The official view, broadcast by NASA and leading astrophysical institutes, was extremely cautious. Yes, the object is unusual. Its spectral analysis revealed compounds not previously seen in comets from our solar system. Its coma had a strange, asymmetrical shape, and most importantly, it exhibited so-called non-gravitational acceleration. Simply put, it wasn't moving quite as it should, obeying only the gravitational pull of the sun and planets. Some other force was acting on it. The system offered an explanation. This, they said, was the result of uneven outgassing. Imagine a spinning asteroid with a geyser on one side, an area that actively vents gas under the heat of the sun. This geyser acts like a small rocket engine, pushing the comet and slightly altering its trajectory. This is a known phenomenon. It has been observed in many comets. The explanation sounded reasonable. It placed the anomaly within the framework of known phenomena. It was calming. It told us, yes, it's interesting. A puzzle for scientists, but it's just a rock. Nothing to worry about. But the alternative view, the voices of the seekers on astronomy forums and in the blogs of independent researchers, painted a very different picture. They screamed about the inconsistencies. First, The non-gravitational acceleration of Atlas was too stable. Cometary jets are erratic. They intensify and fade as the nucleus rotates and its illumination from the sun changes. The acceleration of Atlas, in contrast, was almost constant, smooth. Second, no convincing traces of water were found in its coma, the primary component that should have been causing this outgassing. The coma's composition was exotic, but the amount of water vapor was orders of magnitude less than what was needed to explain such a powerful push. And third, the strangest part, its behavior as it moved away from the sun. Normally, when a comet passes perihelion, its closest point to the sun, and begins to recede, its activity drops sharply. The heating decreases, outgassing stops, and the acceleration vanishes. Atlas, however, continued to accelerate even when it should have long cooled down and become an inert piece of rock. Correlation does not imply causation, but the coincidences kept piling up. And this led us to the boldest, most fantastic hypothesis. What if it's not a comet? What if the outgassing is not outgassing, but the operation of a propulsion system? What if the non-gravitational acceleration is not a random effect, but a series of deliberate, precise maneuvers? What if 3i Atlas is not a visitor, but a courier? Not a wanderer, but a scout? What if its trajectory is not the result of a random stroll through the galaxy, but a calculated route to a specific target? This idea was so monstrous that we initially dismissed it. It was the territory of science fiction, not serious analysis. But the Lunar Code 2 data changed everything. Now we had a potential target, a magnetic anomaly, a beacon, and we decided to test this crazy hypothesis. We decided to run our own simulation. It was a titanic task. We downloaded all publicly available ephemerides of Object 3i Atlas from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory database. These were thousands of points in space and time, the precise coordinates of the object, recorded by dozens of observatories around the world over many months of observation. Then, we built a perfect gravitational model. We took the most accurate model of the solar system, the so-called JPL Development Ephemeris DE430, which accounts for the gravitational influence of the Sun, all 8 planets, Pluto, and several hundred of the largest asteroids. We wrote a program that, knowing the initial position and velocity of Atlas, calculated its trajectory based solely on the laws of gravity. This was its ideal orbit, the orbit that an ordinary, inert rock would follow. And then we compared this ideal trajectory with the real observations. The difference between them, the delta, was the non-gravitational component. It was the digital fingerprint of the mysterious force that was pushing the object. And this is where we got a shock. Mainstream science treated this delta as stochastic, or random, noise, as the result of unpredictable gas emissions. But when we visualized this noise, we saw a structure within it. It was not chaos. It was a series of faint but clearly defined impulses. The object wasn't just being pushed. It was making microscopic course corrections, like a smart missile that checks its map and nudges its trajectory to stay on course. This was no longer a guess. It was a mathematical fact, hidden in plain sight, in the public data. The system either didn't see it or didn't want to. Realizing this, we understood that all official trajectory forecasts for Atlas were wrong. They were based on the assumption that the non-gravitational acceleration was a random factor that would eventually fade away. But if these were deliberate maneuvers, then the object would continue to adjust its course until the very end. So we ran a new simulation. This time, our program didn't just extrapolate the past. It tried to understand the intent. It analyzed all past corrections and built a model to predict future ones. We asked it one question. If these maneuvers continue, where exactly is 3i Atlas headed? We stared at the screen as if it were a sacred text. The computer processed thousands of variations, discarding the improbable ones. On a 3D map of the solar system, a thin green line began to form, the new, refined path of our visitor. At first, it didn't differ much from the official one. It passed by Jupiter, then Mars. But the closer it got to the inner system, the more noticeable the divergence became. The official trajectory, published by the Minor Planet Center, predicted that Atlas would pass at a safe distance from the Earth-Moon system, about 10 million kilometers away. That's far. 25 times the distance to the Moon. No threat, no interest beyond the scientific. But our green line behaved differently. It was bending. Barely noticeable, but persistent. It seemed to be aiming for a narrow gravitational corridor. Hours passed. The model approached our planet. A blue speck, Earth, and a small gray dot next to it, the Moon, appeared on the screen. And at that moment, we realized something impossible was happening. The trajectory of Atlas wasn't leading it past. It was leading it to a direct course, not to Earth, to the Moon. Our hearts pounded. This alone was a discovery that could turn everything upside down. An interstellar object was deliberately flying towards our satellite. But that wasn't all. We zoomed in. The Moon became a huge gray sphere, pockmarked with craters. The green line of the trajectory crossed its orbit and terminated on the surface. The computer calculated the precise coordinates of the intersection point. Latitude. Longitude. A heavy, deafening silence fell. The kind of silence where you can hear your familiar worldview crumbling. We opened another file. The map of Lunicod 2's final route. It marked the point where its instruments had recorded that inexplicable spike. We took the intercept coordinates calculated by our model, and we overlaid them on the map of the Soviet mission. They matched, not approximately, not somewhere in the same region. They matched with a precision of a few kilometers, well within the margin of error of our calculations. At that moment, everything fell into place. This was not a coincidence. This was choreography. Perfectly calculated. Executed over decades or even centuries. On the Moon, on its far side, lies something. An ancient artifact, a power source, a transmitter. We don't know what. But it is active. It emits a powerful magnetic field, which possibly serves as a beacon. 50 years ago, a Soviet rover accidentally heard this beacon, and that information was most likely immediately classified at the highest level. And somewhere in deep space, another object, 3I Atlas, a probe, a ship, an automated courier, was homing in on that signal. It had been traveling for decades, centuries, millennia, making microscopic course corrections along the way. And now, as it approaches, the world's space agencies, which apparently, thanks to more modern orbital magnetometers, were able not just to detect but to precisely triangulate the signal's source, realized that time was running out. The courier is almost at its destination. The new moon race is not a competition against each other. It is a desperate attempt by all key players to get to the package before its rightful recipient arrives. They aren't flying there for helium-3. They are flying there to steal an artifact from the meeting point of two extraterrestrial forces. This explains everything. The rush, the secrecy, the single, hidden goal. They know Atlas is coming. They know when it will arrive. And they have a window, a very small window, to commit the most audacious heist in human history. And we are just the natives living on an island, watching a ship from another world approach. And our chiefs, seeing it on the horizon, are not arguing about how to greet the gods, but about who will be the first to run to the shore and snatch a shiny box from the ship while no one is looking. The question is no longer what is on the moon. The question is, what will Atlas do when it arrives at its destination and discovers that the package it traveled thousands of years through the interstellar void to collect has already been opened? Realization is not a flash of light. It's a slow, cold flood. The feeling that the room you're in is slowly filling with ice water. At first you don't notice, but then the water is at your ankles, then your knees, and you understand there's no way out, and the ceiling is getting closer. In the first hours after the points on our maps converged, we experienced something close to euphoria. It was the vertigo of an explorer who, having pieced together fragments of ancient maps, finally sees the outline of a lost continent. We connected forgotten Soviet telemetry with the trajectory of an interstellar visitor. We found the reason for the new moon race. We had cracked the code. We felt like we were holding a key that could change the world. We thought that all we had to do was show this key to others, and the world would change. How wrong we were. The euphoria faded quickly, replaced by a heavy, oppressive feeling. This is what we call tragic knowledge. The burden of understanding that the reality in which billions of people live is a carefully constructed facade, and you, by chance, have peeked behind the curtain. And now you can't unsee what you saw. You keep walking the same streets, seeing the same people, hearing the same news. But it all seems like a set in a grand play, the true meaning of which is hidden from everyone. And you are one of the few in the audience who has read the script to the end. Our next step seemed obvious and logical. We had to try to break through the wall of silence, not for fame, not for recognition, but out of a sense of responsibility. If our calculations were correct, then humanity wasn't just participating in a secret race. It was playing with a fire it didn't understand. It was trying to steal a relic from an altar without having the slightest idea about the deity to whom that altar was dedicated. The consequences could be unpredictable. We started to act. We prepared a detailed, comprehensive report. Several dozen pages of text, graphs, and calculations. It contained no loud claims or paranoid accusations, only dry facts. Here is the public data from Lunicod 2. Here is the mathematical analysis of the magnetometer spike. Here is the proof of the absence of solar activity on that day. Here are the ephemerides of object 3I Atlas. Here is our trajectory calculation model, accounting for the anomalous acceleration. Here is the overlay of the final destination onto the Lunicod anomaly. Everything was presented in an academic, dispassionate language. Any physicist or celestial mechanics expert could verify our findings. We offered no interpretations. We just put 2 and 2 on the table and waited for someone to say 4. The first people we contacted were official bodies. We sent our report to the press offices of NASA, the European Space Agency, and other global space powers. We found the email addresses of the heads of lunar programs, leading planetologists and specialists in small solar system bodies. We were naive. We expected a dialogue, debates, rebuttals. We expected some kind of reaction. A response came. Or rather, responses. They were almost identical. Automated delivery notifications. Thank you for your interest in our work. We receive a large volume of correspondence and cannot reply to every email personally. If your proposal is of interest to us, we will contact you. That was it. A wall. A smooth, polished wall of corporate indifference. Our data, our discovery, which we thought could shake foundations, simply drowned in an endless stream of spam and fan mail. It was filtered out at the first level, never reaching a single human being. It was classified by an algorithm as noise. Our next step was the science media. We reached out to journalists from major publications specializing in science and technology, the very people whose job it is to ask tough questions and seek the truth. We believed that here we would surely be heard. The reaction was different, but the result was the same. Most simply ignored our email, but some replied. They were polite, even sympathetic refusals. "A very interesting hypothesis," wrote one well-known science correspondent. But it's too speculative. We have no official confirmation of a magnetic anomaly, and your interpretation of Atlas's trajectory contradicts the consensus of leading astrophysicists. We cannot publish material based on such shaky assumptions. Shaky assumptions. Our calculations based on their own public data were labeled shaky assumptions. We realized something important. The system protects itself not only through active concealment, but also through passive rejection. It has a built-in immunity to information that deviates too far from the accepted worldview. Such information is not refuted. It is simply not considered. It is declared heresy, a fringe theory, fodder for ufologists and conspiracy theorists. A journalist who dares to publish such a thing would lose their reputation, their access to NASA experts, their seat at press conferences. They would be exiled from the cast of serious reporters. No one wanted to risk their career for a ghostly, albeit mathematically sound theory. Finally, we went to the people. We posted our report on several large public forums, on Reddit, in the sections dedicated to space and astronomy, on specialized platforms for amateur astronomers. And it was here that we first saw true, active censorship at work. Our post on Reddit lasted only a few hours. Then it was removed by a moderator with the note, "Violation of Rule 6, no unsubstantiated speculation or conspiracy theories." Our data, our graphs, our math, all of it was, with a stroke of a pen, equated with stories about a flat Earth and reptilians. We tried to argue. We wrote to the moderators, pointing out that all our sources were open and verifiable. In response, we received a polite but firm message. Our community's policy is to maintain a high scientific standard. Discussions of the artificial origin of interstellar objects or secret moon bases do not meet this standard. On another, more specialized forum, our thread lasted longer. A few enthusiasts even managed to download our calculations and began to check them. But then one of the administrators, a respected astrophysicist in the community, joined the discussion and left a short comment. "Colleagues, this is a classic example of apophenia, the tendency to see patterns in random noise. The non-gravitational acceleration of comets is a complex and not fully understood process, and data from a 50-year-old Soviet instrument is most likely a calibration artifact or a local glitch. Let's not waste our time on fantasies." His authority was enough. The discussion died down. A day later, the thread was silently archived. We had come up against it in all its power. The architecture of silence. It's not just a conspiracy of silence among a group of people in dark rooms. It's something far more complex and pervasive. It's a self-regulating system that rejects and neutralizes inconvenient truth at every level. At the official level, a wall of bureaucracy and formal replies. At the media level, a wall of reputational risk and professional conformity. At the public level, a wall of moderation and expert snobbery that brands anything unusual as a conspiracy theory. The system doesn't fight the truth. It makes it invisible. It creates an information vacuum around it. It makes anyone who speaks of it feel crazy, lonely, isolated. And that is its most terrifying weapon. It doesn't kill you. It makes you silence yourself. We realized we had lost the battle for public opinion before it even began. The world went on with its life. News agencies breathlessly reported on the preparations for the next Artemis launch. YouTube featured colorful videos about how Chinese taikonauts would build a base from lunar concrete. Elon Musk tweeted about the future of Mars colonization. Everyone looked at the moon and saw the future, resources, new opportunities, and only we, and now you, looked at it and saw a ticking bomb, the site of a coming contact, towards which humanity is rushing headlong to make the biggest mistake in its history. This knowledge isolates you. It separates you from the collective consciousness. You sit in a cafe, overhear a snippet of conversation at the next table about how great it is that we're going back to the moon, and you want to scream that they've got it all wrong, that this isn't a triumph, but a panicked flight, that they aren't going for ice, but for something that has attracted the attention of an outsider. But you stay silent, because you know they won't understand. They'll look at you like you're crazy, and so you continue to silently drink your coffee, carrying this burden alone. But our investigation did not end there. When the official channels went deaf and the public platforms went mute, we went underground, into the shadows. We found others, people like us, those who had seen our post before. It was erased. Those who had independently reached similar conclusions, a decentralized, anonymous network of seekers scattered across the globe. We communicate in encrypted chats, use temporary email addresses, and exchange data through peer-to-peer networks. And here, in this silence, far from the loud world of official science, the work is thriving. Someone, using a network of radio telescopes, is trying to catch echoes of that very magnetic anomaly from the moon. Someone is writing more sophisticated algorithms to analyze Atlas's trajectory, trying to decipher the logic of its maneuvers. Someone is digging through declassified archives of the Apollo program, looking for any hint that the American astronauts might have noticed something too. We are no longer trying to shout through to the system. We realized it's pointless. Our goal now is to gather as much evidence as possible, to prepare for the moment when hiding the truth becomes impossible, when 3i Atlas gets so close that its maneuvers become obvious to everyone, when the first lunar ship of the new era lands in that nameless crater on the far side and its cameras show the world what lies there. We are preparing for that day. And the system, it is preparing too. It continues to talk about scientific missions, about mining helium-3, about peace and cooperation in space. Any questions about anomalies, about strange trajectories, about the suspicious concentration of landing sites, are ignored. But behind this facade of normalcy, a feverish, invisible work is underway. New international protocols on actions in the event of discovering extraterrestrial artifacts are being adopted. Closed-door hearings are held in defense and intelligence committees. Military inspector satellites are changing their orbits to be in the right place at the right time. They are not just building rockets. They are building a legal and political fortress around their secret. They are not preparing for a discovery. They are preparing for its concealment on a new global level. And the most terrifying question now is not what will happen when Atlas arrives. It is, on which side of this new wool will you and I find ourselves when it is finally built? When you find one anomaly, it's science. When you find two connected anomalies, it's a discovery. But when you find 3, 4, 5 anomalies from completely different fields, which at first glance have nothing in common, yet they line up in a perfect chronological sequence like notes in a musical score, that's no longer science. That's a conspiracy. It's evidence of a hidden hand, a conductor leading the entire orchestra while the audience hears only scattered sounds. Up to this point, we have focused on the two key points of our investigation: the Lunacaud 2 anomaly and the trajectory of 3i Atlas. We have worked like microscopists, studying the tiniest details. Now it's time to change our perspective. We need to step back and look at the whole picture. We need to become cartographers. Imagine a huge corkboard in a dark room. In the center, we pin 2 photographs, a shot of that very spot on the far side of the moon, and a blurry image of Atlas taken by a telescope. Between them, we stretch a red thread, the thread of our main discovery, their impossible connection. Now let's start adding other, seemingly unrelated events, newspaper clippings, printouts of scientific articles, screenshots from news sites, and let's stretch new threads. Gradually, the chaotic collection of facts will begin to form a web a map, the architecture of a global cover-up. And at the center of this web, we will see the one who weaves it. Our first new point on the map is not an event from the future, but a ghost from the distant past. We need a historical anchor, proof that what is happening today is not the beginning of the story, but merely its culmination. And this anchor exists. Its name is the WOW signal. On August 15th, 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University, scanning the sky as part of a SETI program, recorded something incredible. For 72 seconds, its receivers picked up a powerful narrow-band radio signal coming from the constellation of Sagittarius. Astronomer Jerry Emmon, who was reviewing the printouts a few days later, was so stunned that he circled the corresponding sequence of characters 6EQUJ5 in red pen and wrote a single word in the margin. Wow. Mainstream science still cannot explain this signal. Its characteristics were strikingly similar to what theorists would expect from an artificial beacon. The signal's frequency was close to 1420 megahertz, the so-called hydrogen line, a fundamental constant of the universe, a cosmic frequency on which intelligent civilizations might broadcast to be more easily detected. The signal was incredibly clean, without noise, and its intensity first rose and then fell, perfectly matching the telescope's antenna pattern. This meant the source was not moving with the Earth. It was out there, in deep space. But most importantly, it never repeated. Dozens, hundreds of times astronomers pointed their telescopes to the same spot in the sky. Silence. The WOW signal remained a unique, singular cosmic whisper that we happened to overhear. The official version, of course, exists. The system cannot leave such a gap in knowledge. We are told it was most likely a rare natural phenomenon, perhaps radiation from an unusual maser or pulsar. Or, according to a more recent hypothesis, the signal could have been generated by a hydrogen cloud around a passing comet, although this version has been heavily criticized. Ultimately, the scientific consensus boils down to an elegant shrug. We don't know what it was, but it was almost certainly not aliens. The WOW signal has become a historical curiosity, a footnote in astronomy textbooks. But what if that's not the case? What if it wasn't just noise? What if it was a ping? A short query sent into the void to see if anyone was listening. We went back to our 3-eye Atlas trajectory model. We had already traced it forward in time, to the rendezvous point on the moon. Now we did the opposite. We ran the simulation into the past. We wanted to know where it came from. This is an incredibly complex computational task, because the slightest error in the present becomes a gigantic deviation in the distant past. But we traced its path back, through our solar system, back into the interstellar void. Thousands of years, millions of years. And when the probability cloud on our map became large enough, we saw something that sent a chill down our spine. Its trajectory, its vector of arrival, pointed with a high degree of probability to the very same sector of the sky in the constellation of Sagittarius from which the WOW signal came. Correlation does not imply causation, but imagine this picture. In 1977, we accidentally heard a short signal, and over 40 years later, an object enters our system that appears to be an automated probe, and it is flying from the very same direction. This changes everything. Atlas is not a random visitor. It is a response, an answer to a question we didn't even realize we had asked. And it is flying, not just to a beacon on the moon. It is flying to its beacon, to a part of its own ancient infrastructure that for some reason ended up in our system. This is not first contact. This is a homecoming, and we, humanity, just happen to be in the way. Now let's stretch a second thread on our map. Let's go back to the recent past, just a few years ago. to the very period when 3I Atlas was first discovered and its interstellar nature was confirmed. While the headlines were full of this discovery, another, far more important event took place in silence and without any media attention. In Geneva, under the auspices of the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, a new version of the so-called post-contact protocols was quietly adopted. This is a set of unwritten rules and recommendations that define how humanity should act in the event of discovering extraterrestrial intelligence. The old protocols, developed back in the 80s, were a product of an optimistic era. They prescribed immediate and full disclosure to the world community. Transparency was the key word. The discovery belonged to everyone. The new version, which we'll call the Geneva Protocol, was completely different. Its text is full of vague, bureaucratic language. Instead of immediate disclosure, it now reads, thoroughly verified and coordinated dissemination of information through specially authorized international bodies. New sections appeared, dealing with information threats, potential cultural shocks, and the need to maintain global stability. In essence, this new protocol created a legal framework for total information control. It gave the system the right to decide what we should know, when we should know it, and in what form. The official explanation was, as always, flawless. The world has changed, they said. In an era of fake news and social media, an uncontrolled announcement of contact could cause global panic, financial collapse, religious wars. The new protocols are simply a precautionary measure, a responsible approach by a mature humanity to the most important news in its history. It sounds reasonable. But look at the timing. The protocol was adopted just a few weeks after the first calculations showing the anomalous behavior of 3I Atlas were published. A coincidence? Or did they already know that contact was not a hypothetical possibility in the future, but an inevitable event that would happen in a few years? They weren't preparing for contact. They were preparing for its concealment. They were building a legal dam in advance to contain the tsunami of truth that they knew was already on its way. The third thread, the strangest and most frightening. April 4th, 2024. This day went down in history under the unofficial name, the Great Silence. At approximately 9 o'clock in the morning, Coordinated Universal Time, the Global Positioning System, GPS, began to go haywire. It wasn't an outage. It was something worse. Desynchronization. The atomic clocks on the satellites, the foundation of our digital civilization, started to produce microscopic but accumulating errors. Your car's navigation system suddenly showed you driving on the next street over. Airplanes on instrumental approach received incorrect altitude data. Global financial markets froze because high-frequency trading, which requires synchronization down to the nanosecond, became impossible. For 6 hours, the planet was in a state of digital chaos. And then, just as suddenly as it began, everything returned to normal. The official explanation came a day later. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and the ESA issued a joint statement about an unpredictable subproton storm caused by a rare configuration of coronal holes on the sun. The stream of charged particles, they explained, temporarily disrupted the sensitive electronics on the satellites. The story seemed plausible, if you didn't look at the details. But the seekers in our network did. They pulled up the data from all solar observatories, and they found that there was no storm capable of causing such an effect. Yes, solar activity was elevated, but not enough for a global failure of this magnitude. But they discovered the most important thing when they overlaid the time of the Great Silence onto the trajectory of 3I Atlas. It was precisely during this 6-hour window that the interstellar object was performing one of its key and most energy-intensive maneuvers, crossing the ecliptic plane, the plane in which all the planets orbit. It was like a ship crossing a powerful underwater current and having to run its engines at full power to avoid being swept off course. What if the Great Silence wasn't caused by the sun? What if it was a side effect of the Atlas propulsion system? What if its engine, based on physical principles unknown to us, creates local distortions in space-time that caused our atomic clocks to fail? Or there's an even more chilling version. What if the failure was artificial? What if the system, knowing about the approach of Atlas, conducted a global drill, created a simulation of an external impact to test how the world's infrastructure would behave, how vulnerable it is, and how quickly control could be restored? It was a rehearsal, a dress rehearsal for a premiere the audience is not supposed to know about. Now let's step back from our board. Look at these threads. An ancient signal from space. An interstellar probe arriving from the same point. A pre-written protocol to control information. A global technological failure perfectly timed with the probe's maneuver. And finally, a frantic race to a lunar beacon, to the probe's destination. This no longer looks like a chain of coincidences. This looks like a meticulously crafted plan. A symphony performed by an invisible orchestra. And every symphony has a conductor. Who is it? Who has the power and resources to coordinate actions on such a level? Not NASA. Not any single government. They are merely the instruments, the violins and cellos in this orchestra. The conductor must stand above them. They must be global and invisible. All the threads we unraveled led to one place, to a quiet, unassuming building in Vienna, to the headquarters of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, UNUSA. On the surface, it's a sleepy bureaucratic organization that deals with coordinating satellite orbits and organizing conferences. But deep within its structure, hidden behind dozens of other committees, there is one that almost no one knows about. Its official name is the Special Committee on Exoplanetary Phenomena and Protocols, or SCEPP. Its members are not politicians or diplomats. They are anonymous representatives from the intelligence services, military departments, and scientific institutions of all the leading powers. This committee does not publish reports. Its meetings are not minuted. It is the planet's nerve center, responsible for the biggest secret of all. It was they who received and classified the Lunokhod 2 data from their Soviet colleagues through a secret exchange back in the 70s. It was they who initiated the update of the Geneva Protocol, and it was they who, upon receiving precise data on the trajectory of Atlas, gave the unspoken order, begin. And the race was on. We found it. We found the conductor. But this discovery brought no relief. It only gave rise to one single, most terrifying question. If they have known about this for so long, if they have been preparing so meticulously, what is their real plan? What are they going to do with the artifact when they get to it first? And what are they going to do with us when 3i Atlas finally arrives to claim its package? Cui bono? Who benefits? This ancient Roman principle is the golden rule for any investigation. When you are faced with a secret, a cover-up, a conspiracy, the most important question is the motive. To understand why the system, represented by its secret committee SEP, acts the way it does, we have to get inside its head. We have to try to think like them. Not as truth seekers, but as guardians of stability. As architects of the global order, for whom the highest values are predictability, control, and the preservation of the existing status quo. Put yourself in their shoes. You are not a comic book villain dreaming of world domination. You are a pragmatist. You sit in a quiet, air-conditioned office in Vienna, and reports land on your desk that would make an ordinary person's heart stop. You know about the beacon on the moon. You know about the probe flying towards it. This is not a hypothesis, not a theory. It is an irrefutable fact, confirmed by data from your most secret and expensive intelligence satellites. What do? What is your first instinctual impulse? Panic? Elation? No. Your first impulse is threat assessment. Threat number 1, existential shock. Let's be honest. Our civilization, with all its technological achievements, is incredibly fragile. It rests on a foundation of beliefs, ideologies, economic models, and religious dogmas. Now, imagine what would happen if you walked up to the UN podium tomorrow and announced, "We are not alone. An ancient alien artifact lies on the moon, and an automated ship from an unknown civilization is approaching it." What would happen to world religions built on the idea of human uniqueness as the pinnacle of creation? What would happen to the stock markets when investors realize that all their long-term forecasts aren't worth the paper they're printed on? How would billions of people react, their worldview, their sense of security and self-importance shattered in an instant? History gives us clues. Remember Orson Welles' War of the Worlds radio broadcast in 1938. A simple radio play caused localized panic in some parts of the US. People believed Martians were actually invading. Now multiply that effect on a global scale, in an age of social media where panic and disinformation spread at the speed of light. From the system's perspective, the uncontrolled disclosure of the truth is not enlightenment. It is an act of global vandalism. It's pressing a red button that could plunge the planet into chaos, anarchy, and war. Keeping the secret is not malicious. In their logic, it is an act of supreme responsibility. It's the bitter medicine they prescribe to humanity to save it from itself. They aren't hiding the truth to enslave us. They are hiding it to protect us from our own fear. Threat number 2, the technology gap. Let's assume they managed to get to the artifact first. What could it be? A power source based on zero-point physics? An interstellar communication device operating on quantum entanglement? A database containing the knowledge of a civilization millions of years older than ours? Whoever gains access to this technology would make a leap comparable to going from a stone axe directly to a fusion reactor. All existing geopolitical balances would be instantly destroyed. Imagine one country, the US, China, Russia, it doesn't matter, getting its hands on an inexhaustible source of clean energy. The entire global economy, built on oil and gas, would collapse overnight. The Persian Gulf nations would become impoverished deserts. Economic power would shift to the new technology holder. And what if it's a weapon, or the knowledge of how to build one? The possessor of the artifact would become the absolute, undisputed hegemon. The race to the moon is not just a scientific competition. In their eyes, it is the most important battle for the future of the planet. The stakes in this game are not prestige, but survival. And that is precisely why they cannot allow the artifact to fall into any single pair of hands. The paradox is that each participant in the race is trying to capture it for themselves, but the overall unspoken consensus of the SEP committee is to prevent anyone from doing it alone. This explains the strange, dual nature of the new moon race. Publicly, they are rivals, but behind the scenes, they are partners in collusion. They share just enough information to ensure no one gets too far ahead. This isn't a race to win. It's an attempt to cross the finish line at the same time, so that later, in secret and away from prying eyes, they can decide how to divide the biggest prize in history. Here, concealment is a tool not only for controlling the population, but also for maintaining the fragile balance of power among the players themselves. Threat number 3, the unknown factor. This is the biggest and most terrifying threat. They know nothing about those who built this beacon and sent this probe. Absolutely nothing. What are their intentions? What is their level of development? Are they peaceful explorers or ruthless colonizers? The dark forest hypothesis, formulated by the writer Cixin Liu, is perfectly apt here. The universe is a dark forest. Every civilization is a hunter with a gun, creeping through the trees. He cannot see the other hunters, but he hears a twig snap. It's another life. What should he do? He cannot shout, "Hey, I'm here. I mean you no harm." Because the other hunter might be stronger and might shoot first, just in case. In this dark forest, the safest thing to do is to remain silent. And if you see someone else, shoot first to eliminate the potential threat. In this paradigm, the artifact on the moon is not a gift, it's a trap. The beacon is the bait. And 3-Eye Atlas is not a courier, but a hunter drawn to that bait. And humanity, in its ignorance, is about to stick its hand in that trap. From the system's point of view, the most rational, safest course of action is to not touch anything, to leave the artifact alone, to let Atlas arrive, do its business, and leave. And for them to watch from a maximum distance, holding their breath, and praying they are not noticed. But they can't do that, because of threat number 2, the technology gap. They cannot afford the luxury of ignorance because they know if they don't take the artifact, their geopolitical rival will. It's a classic prisoner's dilemma played out on a cosmic scale. 2 prisoners are interrogated separately. If both remain silent, they both get a minimal sentence. If one betrays the other, the betrayer goes free, and the other gets the maximum sentence. If both betray, they both get a medium sentence. The best option for both is to remain silent. But because they cannot trust each other, the most likely outcome is betrayal. Each will betray, hoping to go free, and in the end, both will serve time. It's the same here. The safest option for humanity is to leave the artifact alone. But because the US doesn't trust China, and China doesn't trust Russia, they all rush towards it, hoping to gain an advantage. And in the end, they risk bringing down upon the entire planet the wrath of a power they can neither understand nor control. So what do we have? The system's motive is not malice. It is fear. Fear of its own population, fear of its rivals, and most importantly, fear of the unknown. And this fear dictates the only possible strategy from their point of view: concealment and control. They hide the truth from us to prevent panic, and they try to take control of the artifact so that no one else gains a decisive advantage. This isn't just possible. It's the only logical behavior in this situation. Human history provides hundreds of examples to support this conclusion. Remember the Manhattan Project. When scientists realized the possibility of creating an atomic bomb, they didn't publish their findings in scientific journals. They wrote a secret letter to the president, and the project was carried out under conditions of unprecedented secrecy. Not because the government wanted to enslave the world, but because it was afraid that Nazi Germany would build the bomb first. It was a race driven by fear. Remember the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964? The US government used questionable and, as it later turned out, fabricated data about an attack by North Vietnamese patrol boats on an American destroyer to get a resolution from Congress for a full-scale invasion of Vietnam. It was a cover-up dictated by geopolitical interests. Remember the COINTELPRO program, under which the FBI secretly spied on and conducted operations to discredit American civil rights activists for decades. This was control dictated by the fear of internal threats. The system has always acted this way. It hasn't changed. Only the scale has. Before, it covered up military operations and political assassinations. Today, it is covering up contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. But the logic remains the same. And now, understanding their motives, we can predict their next move. They are not going to show their cards, even when they get to the moon. On the contrary, they are setting the stage for an even bigger deception. The Artemis mission will land at the South Pole, as announced. They will plant a flag, take ice samples, and broadcast it live to the world. That will be their alibi. And at the same time, in the radio silence of the far side, unmanned rovers and special astronaut units that no one knows exist will be carrying out a very different operation. They will be retrieving the artifact. And if something goes wrong, if Atlas arrives ahead of schedule, if something unforeseen happens, the world will never know. Communication with the secret mission will simply be lost. It will be written off as a technical failure, a meteorite strike, anything. They weren't hiding the truth to protect us from panic. They were hiding it to buy time. Time to prepare an operation that we will never be told about. They are not just flying to the moon. They are flying to commit a crime of cosmic proportions, and the only witness that can stop them is us, those who know the truth. But what can we do with this knowledge? For now, nothing. Only watch, and wait for the system to make its first mistake. We have understood the system's motives. We have penetrated its cold, pragmatic logic, built on fear and a lust for control. But understanding the killer's motives doesn't help his victim. To truly grasp the scale of what is happening, we must return to the murder weapon itself. We must set aside geopolitics, conspiracy theories, and the psychology of power, and once again become physicists, astronomers, engineers. We need to conduct a detailed, impartial autopsy of the object 3I Atlas itself. Because it is in its structure, its behavior, its composition, like in a DNA code, that the whole truth is written. A truth that is far more terrifying than any conspiracy of earthly governments, because it tells us not about what is being hidden from us. It tells us about who is hiding it. Until now, we have spoken of the oddities of Atlas in general terms. Now it's time to dive into the details. Let's perform a mental anatomical dissection of this visitor from the darkness, based on the crumbs of public data that the system either failed to hide or didn't consider important enough to. Let's start with the official version. This is the starting point, the facade we must examine before looking behind it. For the system, 3I Atlas is a comet, just a very, very unusual one. Let's break it down by three main parameters: composition, behavior, and trajectory. In terms of composition, official spectroscopy shows the presence of silicates, carbon compounds, and some frozen gases like carbon monoxide. Yes, scientists admit its spectrum lacks clear waterlines, which is atypical for comets in our solar system. But they immediately offer an explanation. Perhaps the object formed in a region of its native star system where water was scarce, but other volatile compounds were plentiful. The universe is vast and diverse, they say, and we shouldn't expect all comets to be like ours. This sounds logical. It appeals to our humility in the face of cosmic diversity. Next, behavior, meaning that non-gravitational acceleration. The official model, as we've said, is based on asymmetric outgassing. Scientists build complex computer models showing how pockets of frozen gas on the surface of a rotating nucleus can, when heated by the distant sun's rays, create reactive thrust. They compare it to other known comets that have also exhibited similar behavior, like Comet Hartley 2. Yes, they say, the acceleration of Atlas is more stable than others, but this can be explained by its larger size or unique composition of volatile materials. This also sounds scientific and convincing. Finally, the trajectory. For the system, it's simply a hyperbolic orbit, a mathematical consequence of the immense speed with which it entered our system. It came from a random point in the galaxy, will randomly fly past us, and will fly away to another random point. It's a game of cosmic billiards, and Atlas is just one of the balls on this endless table. Composition, behavior, trajectory. For every anomaly, the system provides a plausible, natural explanation. Each of these explanations, taken individually, seems reasonable. But when you look at them all together, you start to feel like you're being deceived. It's like a suspect's alibi, where he has a seemingly logical explanation for every hour of the crime. But when you put those explanations together, you realize they contradict each other and common sense. Now let's begin our own autopsy, and we'll start with the same thing: composition. But we won't look at the final reports. We'll look at the raw, unprocessed data from the spectrographs. And here is what we see. Yes, there are silicate lines. But when we analyze the isotopic composition of these silicates, we see something impossible. In nature, isotopes of elements are distributed in specific, well-known proportions. In the Atlas data, these proportions are violated. We see an anomalous content of certain stable isotopes of rare metals, such as niobium and technetium-99, which on Earth exists only in artificial form. It's like analyzing a grain of sand and finding not natural quartz, but a perfectly polished microchip. But that's not all. There is a more direct method of analysis that the system prefers not to talk about. It's the analysis of plasma flashes from micrometeoroid impacts. Even in deep space, Atlas is constantly colliding with microscopic dust particles. Each such impact, occurring at tremendous speed, generates a tiny flash of plasma that can be captured and analyzed. It's like taking a biopsy of an object millions of kilometers away. And here's what this biopsy shows. The flashes are not uniform. Their spectrum changes depending on which part of the object the particle hits. This indicates that the object has a complex, multi-layered structure. Beneath an outer layer of dust and organics, which has perhaps accumulated over millions of years of travel, something else is visible. The spectrum of these deeper flashes does not resemble any known mineral. It corresponds to what our material scientists would call a metallic foam, or a composite alloy with a gradient structure. This is not just a rock. This is an industrial alloy, a material created not by nature, but by technology. We are not looking at geology. We are looking at engineering. Now let's move on to behavior, to its engine. The outgassing theory collapses at the first close look at the object's thermal map. If the acceleration were caused by geysers, the corresponding areas on the nucleus's surface should be significantly warmer than the rest, especially after a maneuver. But infrared telescopes like the JWST show the opposite. The most active areas in terms of thrust remain anomalously cold. This completely contradicts the laws of thermodynamics. It's like an engine that doesn't emit heat, but absorbs it. But where does the energy for acceleration come from? The answer may lie in what we call the coma. For official science, the coma is a cloud of gas and dust. But what if it's not? What if it's not a byproduct, but a key design element? Upon detailed analysis of Hubble images, some independent researchers noticed that the coma has a strange, almost parabolic shape and possesses its own weak magnetic field. This led them to believe we are seeing something else. Imagine a swarm of microscopic, perhaps nanoscale, particles that the object releases around itself. This swarm could serve several purposes. First, it's a plasma shield. It protects the main body from cosmic erosion and micrometeoroids, vaporizing them on approach. This explains why the object looks so pristine after millions of years on the road. Second, and most importantly, it's a solar sail. But not a conventional one that works on light pressure, but a far more advanced one, a magnetoplasmic sail. The particles in the coma interact with the solar wind, the stream of charged particles from the sun, and transfer momentum to the main body. This explains why the acceleration is so smooth and constant. It's not a series of explosions. It's a steady, quiet pressure, like the wind filling a sail. Atlas is not a dirty snowball. It's a hybrid solar-powered machine. It uses the energy of our star for its maneuvers. This also explains the anomalous thermal signature. Energy is not released, but collected and converted. This is not outgassing. This is the operation of a solar power plant. And finally, the trajectory. It is the fingerprint of intelligence. We've already said that its course is not a random hyperbola, but a series of precise corrections. But the devil, as always, is in the details. Let's consider one specific maneuver that the system has carefully silenced: the gravity assist at Jupiter. Everyone knows how this works. Spacecraft like the Voyagers use the gravity of giant planets to accelerate like a stone from a slingshot. But Atlas did the opposite. It used Jupiter's gravity to brake. It entered the planet's gravity well at such an angle that it didn't accelerate, but, on the contrary, shed some of its immense interstellar velocity. This is an incredibly complex maneuver requiring the highest precision navigation. A natural object could never do this. It was like an experienced race car driver entering a turn in a controlled drift to shed speed before the finish line. This maneuver is irrefutable proof of not just an engine on board Atlas, but a sophisticated navigation computer, and intelligence. And the Great Silence, the global GPS failure that occurred in April, no longer seems like a coincidence. Most likely, it was at this moment, to perform this precise maneuver, that the Atlas power plant was operating at peak power, creating the very distortions that drove our planetary navigation system mad. So, let's put all the pieces together. Composition, an industrial alloy, behavior, the operation of a solar power plant with a plasma shield, trajectory, the result of calculations by an onboard intelligence. There can be only one conclusion. 3i Atlas is not a natural object. It is an artifact, an autonomous interstellar probe, an artificial creation of an unknown intelligence. This is no longer a hypothesis. It is the only explanation that does not contradict any of the observed facts. And the moment we accept this conclusion, everything changes. Because if it's a probe, then it has a mission. It has a purpose. We already know its intermediate goal, the beacon on the moon. But what's next? What is its ultimate task? We return to our model. We fed it all the new data, the mass estimated from the gravitational maneuver, the efficiency of its engine, the precise parameters of its arrival at the moon. And we asked the computer a new question. What will it do after contacting the beacon? We expected to see a departure trajectory from the solar system. Perhaps it would transmit the collected data and head for the next star. But what the model showed was much worse. After its rendezvous with the moon, 3i Atlas was not going to leave. It was scheduled to perform one last braking burn, this time using Earth's gravity. This burn would shift it from a hyperbolic trajectory to a closed elliptical orbit, a stable, geosynchronous orbit around the Earth. It's not going to leave. It's going to stay. It didn't come here to pick up a package. It came here to take up an observation post. The lunar beacon was not just a destination. It was the power source for the final maneuver, or perhaps a relay, transmitting its final instructions. Its mission doesn't end at the moon. It's only just beginning. We are not dealing with a courier. We are dealing with a sentry, a silent ancient guardian that has traveled for thousands of years to take up its post in orbit around our planet. And the main, most terrifying question now is, from whom, or from what, is it going to protect us? Or perhaps it has come not to protect us, but to protect something from us. It is at this very moment, when you stand at the edge of the abyss and peer into the void, when all the evidence has lined up in one terrifying row leading to an inevitable conclusion, it is at this moment that it is crucial to stop, to take a step back, and to turn on your inner critic. Because the greatest enemy of a truth seeker is not the system. It is his own mind. Our tendency to see patterns in chaos, our thirst for simple answers to complex questions, our desire to believe in grand conspiracies because they give meaning to a seemingly meaningless world. These are the cognitive traps that have snared the greatest minds. And we must ask ourselves the most honest and painful question. What if we're wrong? What if all of this is just a grand intellectual illusion? What if we've built this crystal castle of theories on a foundation of sand? For a moment, let's become our own fiercest opponents. Let's arm ourselves with Occam's razor and try to ruthlessly cut away all our beautiful but perhaps superfluous entities. Let's give the system one more chance. Let's allow it to present its strongest counter-arguments. This is what we call the pendulum of plausibility. We've swung it to its limit towards conspiracy theory. Now we must swing it back with the same force towards skepticism and scientific consensus. Only in this way can we test the strength of our construction. So, argument number 1, and the most powerful, statistical improbability. A skeptic, a true scientist looking at our conspiracy map would say, "You see choreography, where I see only a chain of random, unrelated events. Yes, each of them is interesting in its own way. But you are making a fundamental logical error by combining them into a single narrative." Let's break down this position. The wow signal. A skeptic would say, "In 50 years, we have never been able to replicate it. The simplest explanation is that its source was some terrestrial uncatalogued object, like a military satellite, whose signal bounced off a piece of space debris. This explains both its frequency and its uniqueness. To connect it with Atlas, which arrived 40 years later from roughly the same sector of the sky, is a classic Texas sharpshooter fallacy. The sharpshooter first fires at the side of a barn and then draws a target around the bullet hole, claiming to be a great shot. You're doing the same thing. You're taking two random events and declaring them connected just because you like the idea. The argument is strong. It appeals to the rigor and discipline of the scientific method. Next, Lunicode 2. The skeptic would smirk. You're basing your entire lunar beacon theory on the readings of a single 50-year-old instrument from a Soviet probe known for its not-so-great reliability. You yourself admitted that the vehicle died from overheating. It's most likely that its electronics began to fail before its demise. That peak on the magnetometer is almost certainly the instrument's death throw, a short circuit that produced a false, off-the-charts signal. And the fact that the radiation detector also twitched at the same moment is because they were probably on the same power bus. You haven't found a beacon. You found a record of an electrical failure. And the fact that modern lunar missions are heading to the same area is easily explained by ballistics and illumination requirements. It's just a convenient place to land, one of many. This argument is also weighty. It brings us back from the heights of cosmic mystery to the solid ground of engineering reality. Technology breaks, especially old technology. And finally, 3i Atlas itself. The skeptic would sigh. This is where you completely depart into the realm of fantasy. Non-gravitational acceleration. We've observed it in dozens of comets. An unusual composition. The universe is full of surprises, and an interstellar object, by definition, should be unusual. Your industrial alloys are just your liberal interpretation of a few anomalous lines in a noisy spectrum. Your solar-powered machine is a beautiful metaphor for a complex outgassing process that we don't yet fully understand. Your intelligent maneuvers are the result of you running the data through your own biased mathematical model. Any model will produce the result you feed into it. If you look for intelligence, you'll find it even in the pattern of the clouds. The scientific consensus, based on the work of hundreds of independent scientists, is that this is a comet. A strange, unique, scientifically fascinating comet, but a comet nonetheless. And your theory that it will enter a geosynchronous orbit, that's just a mathematical exercise with no real basis. And so the pendulum has swung to the other side. And we must admit, the skeptic's position is strong. It's logical. It doesn't require us to believe in conspiracies, aliens, or hidden motives. It explains all the anomalies within the existing scientific paradigm, albeit with some assumptions and white spots. Maybe it really is that simple. Maybe we've just stared into the abyss for too long, and it has started to stare back at us. Maybe we should stop, admit we've gone too far, and return to the boring but safe reality. That would be the most reasonable, most rational thing to do. And we were almost ready to do it. We sat there, looking at our map, which now seemed less like a conspiracy board, and more like a board of shame, covered with our own delusions. The red threads looked ridiculous, and in that moment of despair, we noticed something else. One small detail we had missed. One tiny, almost invisible fact that none of the skeptics, none of the representatives of the system had ever mentioned or could explain. And this fact, this single grain of sand in the perfectly lubricated mechanism of the official version, has the power to stop it and grind it to dust. Let's go back to 1973, to Lunar Code 2. We focused on the readings of its magnetometer, but it had another instrument on board that we have so far ignored. It was a laser retroreflector built by French engineers, a simple but brilliant passive instrument. It required no power. Its job was just to be there. Scientists from Earth could aim a powerful laser beam at it, and the reflector, due to its design, would send that beam right back to its point of origin. By measuring the time it took for the light to travel there and back, one could calculate the distance to the moon with millimeter precision. This is the Lunar Laser Ranging Experiment, which continues to this day. So, after the official death of Lunokhod 2 in May of '73, scientists, both Soviet and Western, spent several more years trying to ping its reflector with a laser. They knew its last coordinates, but all attempts were in vain. The reflector was silent. The official version stated that due to its unfortunate parking in the crater, it was likely tilted at an angle that prevented the beam from Earth from hitting it, or that it was covered with that same fatal lunar dust. This explanation satisfied everyone, and it was forgotten until 2010. That year, Phil Stuke, a professor at the University of Western Ontario, working with high-resolution images from the American LRO probe, was finally able to find the exact location of Lunokhod 2. And that's when something strange was discovered. First, it wasn't in a crater, but on its rim. Second, its solar panels were open, meaning it wasn't in an emergency mode. But most importantly, its retroreflector was perfectly aimed towards Earth. It wasn't tilted. And it was clean. The dust that had supposedly killed the rover could not have prevented it from reflecting a laser beam. So why was it silent? Why, for decades, couldn't the world's best observatories get a signal from it? And now, for the most interesting part. After its exact location was found, scientists at the Apache Point Observatory once again aimed their laser at it, and they got a signal. A clear, strong signal. The reflector was working. It was perfectly fine. What does this mean? It means that for almost 40 years, from the moment of the accident until 2010, something was actively preventing the laser beam from reaching the reflector or returning. Something that was located between Earth and this specific region on the moon. A sort of veil, a field, something that absorbed or distorted photons. And this something was connected to the very same magnetic anomaly near which the rover died. This is no longer an instrument failure. This is not a calibration artifact. This is physical evidence, and it is irrefutable. A local field of unknown nature, powerful enough to block a laser beam for 40 years. And then, around 2010, it either weakened or turned off. Why? What else happened around that time? It was then that the first signs began to appear that the interstellar visitor, later to be named Atlas, was entering the outer reaches of our solar system. A coincidence? Or did the beacon, having slept for thousands of years, feel the approach of its courier and switch from a passive standby mode to an active one, turning off its cloaking field and beginning to transmit a navigation signal? This one single forgotten fact shatters the skeptic's entire neat picture. It proves that the anomaly on the moon is real. It not only exists, but it is active and capable of influencing the surrounding space. And if the anomaly is real, then the entire chain we have built ceases to be speculation and becomes the most probable explanation. The pendulum has swung back with a deafening crash, and this time, it's not coming back. We no longer have any doubts. We know. And this knowledge brings no relief. It brings only a cold, clear understanding of the terrifying situation we are all in. When the last doubts crumble, reality takes on a new, frightening clarity. We are no longer looking at the world through the murky glass of conjecture. We see the mechanisms, the gears, and levers hidden behind the screen of everyday life. And to truly understand the nature of the threat and the scale of the cover-up, we need to broaden our field of view even further. We must step beyond astronomy and geopolitics and look at our mystery through the lens of technology. Because the 21st century has brought not only a new moon race, but a new reality where the line between the physical world and its digital reflection is becoming increasingly illusory. We live in an age where a synthetic sky can be created, where artificial intelligence can generate a reality indistinguishable from the real thing, and where quantum technologies promise to break any code and establish a connection that is impossible to eavesdrop on. And in this new, strange world, our story of a lunar beacon and an interstellar probe takes on even more sinister and profound meanings. Because the question arises, if we are on the verge of such technologies, why are we so sure that someone else, thousands or millions of years ahead of us, hasn't been using them for a long time? Let's start with a concept that seemed like science fiction yesterday but is already being tested in laboratories today. Synthetic skies, or as the military calls them, signature management technologies. Imagine a swarm of microscopic satellites, or even an aerosol of smart nanoparticles dispersed in the upper atmosphere. This swarm could be controlled from a single center, and by changing its optical and radio-electronic properties, create illusions in the sky. It could hide a real object by creating a cloaking device around it that absorbs or bends radar signals and light. Or conversely, it could create a false target, a phantom aircraft, a missile, or even an entire armada of ships where there is actually nothing. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, has been working in this direction for many years, officially to create a new generation of camouflage and electronic warfare systems. But what if this technology is much older and more advanced than we think? What if that cloaking field that hid the Lunokhod 2 retro reflector for 40 years is an example of such technology? Not a crude veil, but an intelligent system that was actively editing reality in that specific sector of space. It didn't just block the laser beam. Perhaps it created the illusion of empty space, redirecting photons and radio waves around the anomaly like water flowing around a stone. We, with our primitive radars and telescopes, looked at that region and saw what we were allowed to see. Now let's take the next step. If such technology exists, why are we so sure it's only being used on the moon? What if something similar has long been deployed here, in near-Earth orbit? How many unidentified flying objects, strange lights in the sky, and anomalous signals that we dismiss as hallucinations or natural phenomena are actually glitches, or conversely, demonstrations of this global system of illusions? This gives rise to a deep technological paranoia. We can no longer trust our own eyes and instruments. The sky above our heads ceases to be the final frontier of honest, objective reality. It becomes a screen onto which someone, or something, is projecting the picture it wants us to see. Now let's talk about artificial intelligence. We are living in the era of the neural network revolution. We have taught machines to write texts, paint pictures, recognize faces, and drive cars. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. The real breakthrough is happening in the field of data analysis. Modern AI systems are capable of sifting through petabytes of information and finding hidden patterns invisible to the human eye. It is precisely these systems that serve the system. Imagine a global neural network, which we'll tentatively call the Oracle. Its task is to monitor all information flows on the planet. Scientific publications, telescope data, social media posts, financial transactions, satellite images, all of it flows into its neural nodes. The Oracle is the perfect tool for concealing the truth. First, it acts as a hypersensitive filter. When we published our investigation on Reddit, it was removed almost instantly. We thought a human moderator did it. But what if it was the Oracle? What if it scans all public platforms in real time for certain keywords and their anomalous combinations? Lunicod 2, magnetic anomaly, 3-eye atlas, trajectory, and upon detecting a dangerous leak, automatically sends a signal to a moderator or even initiates the removal itself under the guise of fighting spam. We are trying to break through an information blockade, playing against a machine that thinks thousands of times faster and sees the entire board. Second, the Oracle acts as a noise generator. If the truth cannot be hidden, it can be drowned in a flood of lies. What if the hundreds and thousands of ufology websites, crazy theories about reptilians and a flat earth, don't just exist on their own, but are actively supported and even generated by this system? It creates a halo of absurd and easily refutable conspiracy theories around the real, dangerous anomaly, the lunar beacon. And in the end, when someone like us stumbles upon the real truth, it has already been poisoned, discredited by association. Any mention of a cover-up or artificial object automatically puts us in the same camp as the lunatics. It's a brilliant information warfare strategy. Don't build a wall, but dig a moat around it and fill it with informational filth. But there is a third, most frightening function of the Oracle. It is a predictor. By analyzing all the data on the preparation of lunar missions, the movement of military fleets, the procurement of strategic materials, it can model the intentions of all players with the highest accuracy. The SEP committee, using the Oracle, knows not only what has happened, it knows what will happen. It sees all possible scenarios and can take countermeasures in advance. It is playing chess with the future. And in this game, we are just pawns, whose moves have been calculated 10 steps ahead. Finally, the quantum horizon. This is the most speculative, but also the most important part of our technological context. The world's leading powers are investing billions in building quantum computers. We are assured this is for developing new drugs and materials. But the real reason for this race is cryptography. A quantum computer could instantly break any existing encryption that underpins the security of all our banking, government, and military communications. Whoever builds such a machine first will have absolute access to all the world's secrets. But quantum mechanics has another side: quantum communication. Using the effect of entanglement, it is possible to create a communication channel that is, in principle, impossible to eavesdrop on. Any attempt to intercept a message would instantly destroy its quantum state and be detected. Now let's return to our story. We wondered how the world powers found out about the beacon on the moon. We assumed they used modern magnetometers in orbit. But what if they used something far more advanced? What if the artifact on the moon and the probe Atlas are not just a beacon and a receiver? What if they are two nodes of an ancient quantum network? They don't exchange radio signals. They communicate instantly at any distance using entangled particles. This would explain why we can't intercept their conversations. They simply don't exist in the radio spectrum. It would also explain why the beacon woke up precisely when Atlas entered the system. Perhaps the probe sent it a quantum ping that we were fundamentally unable to detect. And now, for the most disturbing conclusion. If this is the case, then humanity, with its clumsy attempts to crack this mystery, looks like a native trying to open a laptop with a stone axe. We are trying to understand quantum technology with electromagnetism. We are looking for radio signals where there is quantum silence. But what if one of the earthly players has already gotten closer to this secret? What if the race to build a quantum computer on Earth is actually a race to create a key, an interface, that will allow them not just to detect, but to connect to this extraterrestrial network? To gain access to its information? This transforms the moon race from a simple theft of an artifact into something much more grandiose. It's an attempt to hack the galactic internet. And the consequences of such a hack could be unpredictable. What if, by connecting, they don't just gain knowledge, but reveal our presence to the entire network? What if the dark forest is not just a metaphor, but the actual security system of this network, which automatically destroys any unauthorized node? We think we are the future hackers. But what if we are just a virus, about to be detected and removed by the system's antivirus? We are learning to create illusions in the sky. We are building machines that predict the future. We are trying to master the power of the atom. But what if someone has long been using all of this against us? What if we are not on the verge of great discoveries, but in the center of a great deception, played out with technologies we are only just beginning to imagine? And the main question that arises from this technological context is, if 3i Atlas is such a perfect probe, why is it alone? Why isn't it followed by a fleet? Why isn't it trying to hide its presence? Maybe it isn't hiding. Maybe it's just bait. A bright, shiny toy thrown to us to focus all our attention on it. And while that's happening, under the cloak of technological invisibility, something else has already entered our system. Something much more serious. And we haven't even noticed, because we were too busy watching the magic trick they were showing us. And so we come to the point where data analysis ends and the territory of pure meaning begins, where the numbers on screens and the lines on graphs give way to the eternal existential questions that humanity has asked itself since it first looked up at the stars. We have dissected the what, where, when, and why. We have constructed a picture of a conspiracy based on facts. But now we must ask, so what? What does all this mean for us? Not for governments or corporations, but for us. For the species that calls itself Homo sapiens, wise man, and which may be on the verge of realizing just how arrogant that name is. Our investigation has led us to the edge of a great philosophical abyss, and we must look into it. Because only there, in that cold, dizzying void, can the true scale of what is happening be found. At the heart of all our modern cosmology lies one great, deafening paradox, the Fermi paradox. There are hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy. Many of them, as we now know, have planets. Some of these planets are in the so-called habitable zone, where liquid water can exist. If even a tiny fraction of these planets gave rise to life, and a tiny fraction of that life evolved to an intelligent level, then the Milky Way should be teeming with civilizations. Some of them should be millions, even billions, of years older than ours. In that time, even at the slowest interstellar travel speeds, they should have colonized the entire galaxy. We should see them everywhere, see their artifacts, hear their signals, stumble upon their probes at every turn. but we see nothing. The cosmos is silent. This is called the Great Silence, and for decades we have tried to explain it. Maybe we are unique? Maybe the emergence of intelligent life is such an incredibly rare event that it happened only once in the entire galaxy, here on Earth? This is a comforting, but statistically highly improbable hypothesis. Maybe all civilizations inevitably self-destruct before they can venture into space? This is the Great Filter hypothesis, a grim warning for ourselves. Or maybe they are out there, but they speak a language we don't understand, or exist in a form we cannot perceive. But our investigation offers a new, far more disturbing answer to the Fermi paradox. What if the cosmos isn't silent? What if it's just very, very good at whispering? What if the Great Silence is not the absence of life, but the result of a global, galaxy-wide policy of containment and concealment? Let's return to the dark forest hypothesis. It states that any civilization that announces its existence risks being immediately destroyed by another, more advanced civilization, simply as a precaution. In this model, the universe is not an empty space, but a battlefield where survival belongs to those who are best at hiding. Until now, we considered this hypothesis as an explanation for why we hear no one. But now let's turn it on its head. What if the artifact on the moon and the probe Atlas are the very instruments of this policy? What if there exists in the universe some ancient, ultra-powerful civilization, or perhaps an alliance of civilizations, which we can tentatively call the observers or the gardeners? Their goal is not colonization or destruction, but the maintenance of order, the preservation of the galactic status quo. They monitor young, potentially dangerous species like ours and gently, imperceptibly guide their development, or if necessary, terminate it. In this model, the artifact on the moon is not just a beacon, it's a watchtower, part of an ancient early warning system set up around thousands upon thousands of star systems with the potential for intelligent life. It slept for billions of years while dinosaurs roamed this planet. But when we detonated the first atomic bomb, when we began sending radio signals into space, when we set foot on the moon, it woke up. It detected that the local species had crossed a certain technological threshold. It phoned home. And 3i Atlas is the response. It is not a hunter from the dark forest. It is an inspector, an auditor. It is not coming here to destroy us. It is coming here to conduct an assessment. And based on the results of this assessment, a decision will be made. Are we worthy of joining the galactic community? Or do we represent a threat that needs to be contained? This hypothesis changes everything. It explains the Great Silence not as a result of fear, but as a result of order. Other civilizations are silent not because they fear each other, but because they are forbidden to speak to immature species like ours. It's a galactic quarantine, and we are about to break it. Our desperate race to the lunar artifact is not just a theft. In the eyes of the observers, it may look like an act of aggression, like an attempt by savages to break into a watchtower to steal the guard's weapon. We are not just playing with fire. We are trying to set the house ablaze in the presence of the fire inspector. And this leads us to the deepest existential horror. We have always considered ourselves the masters of our own destiny. We thought our history was a story of our own choices, our wars, our discoveries. But what if that's not the case? What if, throughout our entire history, we have been watched and sometimes gently nudged in the right direction? How many myths of gods descending from the heavens? How many unexplained leaps in the development of ancient civilizations? How many religious revelations were actually the work of these invisible gardeners? This strips us of our agency. We cease to be the protagonists of our own play. We become supporting characters, extras in a drama of cosmic scale whose rules we do not even know. Our sense of self-importance, our belief in our uniqueness, it all turns out to be an illusion. We are not the pinnacle of creation. We are just one experiment in a giant galactic laboratory, and perhaps not the most successful one. This realization brings a sense of deep, almost unbearable cosmic loneliness. But it's a new kind of loneliness. It's not the loneliness of the only living being in an empty universe. It's the loneliness of a child who suddenly realizes he lives in a glass house, and outside the windows stand silent, faceless adults, watching his every move. They are not evil. They are not good. They just are. And their silent presence is far more terrifying than any overt threat, because it robs us of our freedom. It turns our planet into a zoo, a reservation, and the system, our earthly committee SEP, appears in a completely new light in this picture. They are not villains. They are the tribal chiefs who were the first to understand that their island is actually part of a nature preserve. And now, they are desperately trying to hide this knowledge from the rest of the tribe to avoid panic. And at the same time, they're trying to figure out how to negotiate with the managers of this preserve, or more likely, how to deceive them and break free. Their race to the moon is an act of desperate rebellion, an attempt to seize the tools of the observers to level the playing field. It's an uprising at the zoo, and we are its unwitting participants. This knowledge is tragic. It shatters our illusions. It shows us how fragile our position is. We are caught between two forces, neither of which we can control. On one side, the system, which is willing to sacrifice truth for the sake of order. On the other, the observers, who are willing to sacrifice our freedom for the sake of galactic order. And we have no good choice. To support the system is to accept a life of lies. To try to reveal the truth is to risk provoking a reaction from the observers, the consequences of which could be catastrophic. Perhaps the silence of space is not the absence of life. Perhaps it is a sign of respect that the survivors pay to the dead, to those who failed the test, to those who were too loud, too aggressive, too human. And now 3i Atlas is coming here to conduct our evaluation. It will watch. It will watch our race to the moon, our lies, our wars, our inability to agree even in the face of such a grand mystery. And what conclusion will it draw? Will it classify us as promising or as hopeless? The answer to that question may not just determine our future. It may determine whether we have a future at all. And the most terrifying aspect of this philosophical horizon is that we may have already failed this exam. The very fact that we have staged this secret, selfish race to the artifact, instead of uniting to greet the visitor as a world, is already the answer. The answer that Atlas will record in its logbook. Species, Homo sapiens. Development level, planetary. Exhibits high intelligence in technology and extremely low intelligence in social interaction. Prone to tribalism, deceit, and self-destruction. Prognosis, negative. Recommendation, continue quarantine. Threat level, elevate to orange. We are so afraid of what Atlas will do when it arrives. But what if it has already done everything? What if its mission is simply observation, and the verdict on us is being delivered by ourselves, with our every action, and the system, in trying to protect us, is actually only compounding our guilt, demonstrating to the entire galaxy our worst quality, our inability to be honest even with ourselves. The philosophical chill is searing, but it must not paralyze. Realizing our insignificant place in the cosmic drama is not the end of the investigation. It is its new stage. When despair hits bottom, the only thing left to do is push off and resurface, but with a new, crystal clear understanding of reality. We are no longer searching for the truth in an abstract sense. We are looking for specific tangible points in space and time where the hidden reality is about to break through. We are moving from metaphysics back to physics, from the question, what does it mean, to the question, where and when will it happen? Because every secret operation, every conspiracy has an Achilles' heel, the future. The future cannot be completely controlled. It is full of variables. And it is in these variables that we must find our next clue. The system can control the past by rewriting archives. It can control the present by managing information flows. But the future is a battlefield where we, the seekers, still have a chance. We need to find the next moment of truth, the next inevitable event that will force the system to act and perhaps make a mistake. And such an event exists. It's already on the schedule. It has a name, a launch date, and a clearly defined objective. At least, an official one. It is the European Space Agency's mission called Hera. Let's look at it through the eyes of an ordinary person reading the news on the ESA website. Hera is the European contribution to the International Asteroid Impact and Deflection Assessment, AIDA, collaboration. It sounds noble and understandable. The threat from space is real, and we must learn to defend ourselves against it. The program consists of 2 parts. The first part, the American one, has already been successfully completed. In September of 2022, the DART spacecraft, Double Asteroid Redirection Test, slammed into the small asteroid Dimorphos, which orbits the larger asteroid Didymos at a speed of 22,000 kilometers per hour. It was a kinetic impact, cosmic billiards. The goal was to test if we could change the orbit of a potentially hazardous object this way. The experiment was a brilliant success. The orbit of Dimorphos changed even more than the models predicted. For the first time in history, humanity deliberately altered the motion of a celestial body. The Hera mission, scheduled to launch in October of 2024, is the second part of this grand performance. Its task is to fly to the Didymos Dimorphos system a few years later and conduct a detailed crime scene investigation. The spacecraft will study the crater left by the DART impact, accurately measure the mass and composition of Dimorphos, and analyze all the consequences of the collision. This will help refine our models and make planetary defense technology more reliable. Everything is logical, transparent, and strictly scientific. A beautiful story of international cooperation to save humanity. But we already know that the system tells the most beautiful stories when it needs to hide the ugliest truth. Let's apply our method to the Hera mission. Let's start looking for cracks in the official version. And the first crack is the budget and priority. In recent years, the ESA, like many other space agencies, has faced serious financial difficulties. Many ambitious scientific projects are being postponed or canceled. And against this backdrop, the Hera mission gets the green light and generous funding. Why this one? Is studying the aftermath of a single asteroid impact really so much more important than, say, missions to explore the icy moons of Jupiter or search for exoplanets? The official answer? Planetary defense is an absolute priority. But is it? The Didymos Dimorphos system poses no threat to Earth. It's just a convenient laboratory in space. There's no rush to study it. The results of the DART impact have already been studied quite well with ground-based and space telescopes. Hera's flight will provide important refinements, but it won't revolutionize our understanding. So why are hundreds of millions of euros being spent on this courtesy call, while other, more fundamental missions are put on hold? This is the first inconsistency. It tells us that the true value of the Hera mission to the system is much higher than its official scientific program. The second crack is the trajectory and schedule. And this is where it gets really interesting. Let's look at Hera's flight plan. Launch in October of 2024. Then, a long 2-year journey to the asteroid. Along the way, the spacecraft is scheduled to perform a gravity assist at Mars. This is standard practice to save fuel. But let's look at the dates. Hera's arrival at the Didymos Dimorphos system is planned for late 2026. Now let's overlay the trajectory of 3i Atlas onto this timeline. Its closest approach to the moon, the moment of truth, according to our calculations, will occur in mid-2026. That is, precisely during the period when Hera will be in deep space, on the final leg of its approach to the asteroid. But that's not all. Let's look at the geometry. At the moment when Atlas is performing its key maneuver near the Earth-Moon system, the Hera spacecraft, millions of kilometers away, will be in a unique position in space. It will be almost exactly on a line with Atlas and the Sun. It will have the opportunity to observe Atlas from an angle that is inaccessible to any terrestrial or near-Earth telescope. It will be able to see what Atlas is doing from behind in perfect backlighting. It is the ideal observation position. A coincidence? Or was the Hera mission designed from the start not so much to study an asteroid, but to become an advanced observation post, a spy that will monitor the arrival of Atlas from a safe distance? This explains both its priority and its strange, at first glance, schedule. The official target, the asteroid Didymos, is just a cover. A convenient, scientifically justified reason to send the most advanced observation complex to the right place in space at the right time. And the third, deepest crack is the equipment on board Hera. Officially, its main instruments are a high-resolution camera, a LiDAR for creating a 3D map of the asteroid, and a hyperspectral imager to study its composition. This is a standard kit for an asteroid mission. But on the equipment list, there are two items that stand out. The first is a new generation onboard computer called Hera's Onboard Reliable Dependable Intelligent Avionics, or HERA. The ESA proudly states that it is one of the most powerful AI processors ever sent into deep space. It is capable of autonomous navigation and decision-making without input from Earth. The official explanation: this is necessary for complex maneuvers near the asteroid and for controlling the 2 mini-satellites that Hera will deploy into orbit around Dimorphos. But such computational power seems excessive for the stated tasks. Why do you need such a complex brain just to fly around a rock? What if its real task is not navigation, but analysis? What if it's loaded with the very oracle algorithms we talked about? What if it's supposed to analyze the behavior of Atlas in real time, try to hack its signals, predict its next moves? Hera is not just a telescope. It's a branch of the SEP committee sent into space. It's their brain, their analytical center, sent to the front line. The second strange instrument is PAL-2, a plasma analyzer. Officially, it's designed to study the interaction of the solar wind with the asteroid's surface. But its sensitivity and measurement range are such that it is perfectly suited to analyze the very coma, that magnetoplasmic sail that Atlas uses. It will be able to not just see this sail, but also measure its density, field strength, and energy signature. It will be able to read the operating mode of the Atlas engine. This is not a scientific instrument. This is a tool for technical reconnaissance. So the picture is coming together. The Hera mission is not what it seems. It is a multi-purpose, deeply clandestine operation. Its official goal is a smokescreen. Its true, unspoken goal is to become the main witness to the coming event. It is the system's Plan B. While the main forces, the Artemis and Chang'e missions, will be attempting the heist of the century on the moon, Hera will be playing the role of a sentry. It will watch Atlas. If the operation on the moon goes successfully and unnoticed, Hera will calmly complete its scientific program at the asteroid and return home with unique data on planetary defense. But if something goes wrong, if Atlas reacts to the interference, if it takes some action, Hera will be the first and possibly the only source of information about it. Its powerful AI will analyze the threat, and its transmitter will send an alarm signal to Earth. It is a fail-safe, insurance for the worst-case scenario. And this knowledge gives us, the Seekers, a unique opportunity. We cannot stop the moon race, but we can watch Hera. Its flight is our countdown. Every maneuver, every release of its telemetry, even what is officially cleared, will be a source of invaluable information for us. We will compare its actual trajectory with the declared one. We will look for the slightest deviations that might reveal its true intentions. The system thinks Hera is their spy, but we will turn it into ours. It will become our beacon in the darkness, its path illuminating the way to the main event. The countdown has begun. The launch of Hera is the starting pistol for the final decisive lap. And now we know where to look, not just at the moon, but also to that point in deep space where this small, brave, and very deceitful European spacecraft is headed. It is flying towards its destiny, and towards ours. In a grand cosmic drama where the fates of civilizations are at stake, it's very easy to forget about the people. We talk about impersonal forces, the system, the observers, the seekers. We operate with petabytes of data, complex orbital mechanics, and abstract geopolitical models. But behind every line of code, behind every movement of a joystick controlling a telescope, behind every sleepless night spent trying to decipher an anomalous signal, there are living people, flesh and blood, with their own hopes, fears, and motivations. And to truly understand the depth of this conflict, we must for a moment shift our focus from the macro level to the micro level. We must see this story not as a clash of titans, but as the sum of millions of small, personal stories. Because it is in these stories, in the human factor, that both the greatest weakness of the system and the greatest strength of the seekers lie. The system is not a monolithic, omniscient, artificial intelligence. It is an organization made up of people. Yes, at the very top, in the SEP committee, sit cynical pragmatists playing their big game. But below them are thousands upon thousands of ordinary scientists, engineers, analysts, and operators. People who sincerely believe in science, in progress, in the mission of their agencies. Most of them are not privy to the great secret. They work on their small piece of the puzzle without seeing the whole picture. An engineer in Houston writing code for the Artemis landing module believes he is helping humanity return to the moon. An astronomer in Chile processing images from a telescope believes she is studying a unique comet. They are cogs in a giant machine, and they don't know what this machine is actually producing. But sometimes, by the law of large numbers, one of these cogs starts to notice that something is wrong, that the part he is machining doesn't match the overall blueprint, that the machine is making strange noises. And then, that person has a choice. To continue doing his job, ignoring the inconsistencies. That's the easiest and safest path. It guarantees a salary, a career, a quiet life. Or to start asking questions, to try to peek into the next workshop, to talk to the other workers. This path is dangerous. It leads to trouble, to being fired, to ostracism. But it is on this path that insiders are born. The sources of leaks, the very breakthroughs that give us, the seekers, our food for analysis. Let's call one such person the codename Dr. Anders. This is a composite character, based on several real but anonymous stories circulating in our network. Dr. Anders is a brilliant astrophysicist working at a leading European flight control center. He is one of those who calculates trajectories. His duties include analyzing telemetry from interplanetary probes and refining their orbits. A few years ago, his department was tasked with calculating the optimal trajectory for the Hera mission. It was routine work. But Anders was a perfectionist. He noticed that the initial data provided by the client had strange constraints. He was instructed to avoid certain launch windows and to use a gravity assist at Mars, even if it wasn't optimal in terms of fuel economy. When he asked his superiors, he was politely told that it was due to requirements for solar panel orientation and the thermal regime of the spacecraft. The explanation was logical, but Anders felt it was incomplete. He ran his own independent simulation without these constraints, and he discovered that there was a much faster and cheaper trajectory to the asteroid Didymos, but that trajectory didn't place the spacecraft at that unique observation point for 3I Atlas in 2026. He realized he had been forced to solve a problem with a predetermined but hidden answer. He realized the Hera mission had a hidden purpose. What did he do next? He didn't go to the press. He didn't write expose posts on the internet. He was part of the system and knew how it worked. Instead, he did something much more subtle. He accidentally made a mistake in one of the interim reports that was published in a public science archive. A small, almost imperceptible error in one of the coefficients. This error didn't affect the final result, but for someone who knew what to look for, it was like a signal flag. It was a cry for help that could only be heard by those who spoke his language. One of our seekers, a former ballistics expert, noticed this flag, and that became the starting point that allowed us to uncover the true purpose of Hera. Dr. Anders didn't betray the system. He just gave it a chance to be more honest. And there are dozens like him. They are humanity's immune system, trying to fight the disease of secrecy from within. Now let's look at the other side. At us, the seekers. Who are we? We are not a secret organization with huge budgets. We are a decentralized, chaotic network. Amateur astronomers, retired military analysts, programmers, students, journalists who are tired of rewriting press releases. Our main weapon is not secret technology, but something that is fundamentally unavailable to the system, collective intelligence, freedom from hierarchy, and, most importantly, time. We have an infinite amount of it. Let's meet one of them. Let's call him Chris Green. He lives in a small town in Arizona. By day, he works as a systems administrator at a local college, and by night, he becomes a hunter of anomalies. In his backyard stands a homemade telescope, assembled from parts bought on eBay and connected to an old laptop. Chris is one of thousands of amateur astronomers around the world who point their modest instruments to the sky every clear night. The system looks down on them as harmless eccentrics, but it underestimates them, because they have something that the big professional observatories do not: numbers and distribution. Tens of thousands of eyes looking at the sky from different points on the planet create a global observation network that is impossible to control. On the very night that 3I Atlas was performing its maneuver near Jupiter, the big telescopes were, of course, pointed at it. But they were looking at the object itself. Chris Green, out of his amateur habit, was looking not at it, but next to it. He was trying to photograph the faint glow of its coma. And he saw what no one else did. On one of his long exposure images, next to the blurred spot of Atlas, 3 tiny, barely visible points of light appeared. They formed a perfect equilateral triangle and moved along with the object. In the next image, taken a few minutes later, they were gone. Chris first thought it was an artifact of his old camera's sensor, cosmic rays hitting the sensor. But he was meticulous. He checked dozens of his other images. He never found such an artifact again. He posted his image on one of the private forums, where we noticed it. Professional astronomers would have dismissed it as noise, but we took it seriously. We contacted other amateurs who had photographed Atlas on the same night from other parts of the world, and we found 2 more confirmations. On images from Australia and Chile, taken at about the same time, These 3 points were also visible. It wasn't an artifact. They were real objects. 3 small probes that accompanied Atlas but kept their distance outside the bright glow of its coma, and possibly activated cloaking fields that sometimes failed. What does this mean? It means Atlas is not a solitary probe. It is an aircraft carrier, the flagship of a small reconnaissance squadron. And the system most likely knows about it. But it will never publish this information, because a lone probe is a scientific mystery. But a squadron of probes is a military threat. Chris Green's discovery, made with equipment worth a couple of $1,000s, turned out to be more valuable than data from the multi-billion-dollar Hubble telescope. Because he was looking where he wasn't told to look. He was free. And here we come to the main battlefield. It's not space. It's information. The system is strong because of its centralization. It has enormous resources, but they are all concentrated in a few places, and all decisions are made by a small group of people. This makes it efficient, but also vulnerable. If you cut off one channel, the whole structure could fail. The Seekers, on the other hand, are strong because of their decentralization. We are like a mycelial network. We have no central hub. If you destroy one part of the network, the others continue to function. We cannot be beheaded. But this strength is also our weakness. We are fragmented. We lack resources. And we are constantly under pressure. The work of people like Chris Green did not go unnoticed. Soon after publishing his findings, he started receiving strange messages. First, it was ridicule and accusations of forgery on the same forums. Then, polite but persistent emails to his personal account from people claiming to be researchers who asked him to provide all the raw files of his images for independent verification. And then the calls started. Silent calls in the middle of the night. Someone hacked his social media accounts. These were not direct threats. This was a tactic of psychological warfare. The system couldn't arrest him or silence him by force. That would attract too much attention. But it could make his life unbearable. Make him doubt his own sanity. Make him give up his hobby, delete all the files, and go back to his quiet life as a systems administrator. It's a subtle, dirty war being fought in the back alleys of the internet, in private messages, in the digital shadows. And many people break, but not all, because we have something the system doesn't. We have a community. When the pressure on Chris started, other members of our network responded immediately. We helped him secure his data by creating encrypted copies on dozens of servers around the world. We launched our own investigation, tracing the IP addresses of the attacks back to front companies linked to private intelligence firms working on government contracts. We couldn't stop the pressure, but we showed Chris that he was not alone, that his work was important, that hundreds of people just like him had his back, and that gave him the strength not to give up. The human factor is a double-edged sword. It creates whistleblowers within the system, but it also creates heroes among us. And the outcome of this war depends on whose will proves stronger. The will of those fighting to maintain their control, or the will of those fighting for the right to know. History, like an orbit, has a way of coming full circle. To understand the end, you must return to the beginning. But this return is not a simple repetition. It is a look at the same events, but from the vantage point of the entire journey. With a wealth of knowledge that turns what seemed like a coincidence into a link in a logical chain, and what looked like chaos into a perfectly directed performance. We began our investigation with one simple question. Why did the new moon race start now? And we found an answer that we thought was exhaustive. They are flying to the beacon because Atlas is flying to it. But now, having navigated the labyrinths of concealment, studied the anatomy of the probe itself, and grasped the existential scale of what is happening, we understand that this answer was incomplete. It was only the first layer of the onion. It's time to return to the very first day, to the dual event that started it all. But now we will see it not as a trigger, but as the first act of a grand, pre-planned deception. Let's go back to the beginning, to the day the new moon race was officially announced. And on the same day, astronomers confirmed the interstellar nature of 3I Atlas. And only now do we begin to understand that this was not just a coincidence. It was intentional. Imagine a SEP committee meeting room. Faceless representatives of intelligence and military agencies sit around a long table. On a large screen is a map of the solar system. A red dot representing Atlas is moving inexorably towards Earth. Their oracle system has already calculated its trajectory with perfect accuracy. They know its target. They know its arrival time. They know that the window of opportunity to get to the lunar artifact first is closing fast. They need to act. But how? How do you launch the most ambitious and expensive space program since Apollo without arousing suspicion? How do you get parliaments to allocate hundreds of billions of dollars? How do you mobilize the entire aerospace industry without explaining the real reason? A simple order won't be enough. They need a legend, a cover story, a perfect, flawless narrative that explains everything. The rush, the secrecy, the enormous expense. And they find that story. They decide not to hide the new moon race. On the contrary, they decide to lead it, to make it public, loud, to turn it into a global spectacle. They announce the Artemis program. They talk about resources, science, Mars. They position themselves against China, reviving the rhetoric of the Cold War. They turn a covert operation into a sporting event. And it's a brilliant move, because the race itself becomes the smokescreen. Everyone argues about who will be first, the Americans or the Chinese. Everyone discusses the design of new spacesuits and the power of new rockets. No one asks the main question, why are we even going there? They have replaced the question why with the question who. But that's not enough. They need to explain the hurry. Why now? Why couldn't they wait another 10 years? Prepare better? Make the technology cheaper? And this is where the second part of their plan comes into play. They decide to use Atlas itself as a catalyst, but not in the way we thought. On the same day that NASA holds its big press conference announcing the return to the moon, a coincidental leak occurs from the astronomical community. Data confirming the interstellar nature of Atlas unexpectedly hits the press. And these two events, happening on the same day, begin to resonate with each other in the information space. At first, subconsciously, and then, more and more, explicitly. The first articles, the first blogs, the first videos appear, whose authors ask the question, are these two events connected? And the system doesn't fight these rumors. It encourages them. It feeds them food for thought. Insider hints are dropped through front accounts. Articles appear in reputable but not too mainstream publications in which unnamed sources at NASA express concern about the unusual behavior of the comet. They create and control the conspiracy theory themselves. But it's a light version of a conspiracy theory. Safe, manageable. Its essence boils down to this. The governments know that Atlas is more than a comet. Perhaps it's an alien ship, and they are flying to the moon to meet it there. The moon is neutral territory, the perfect place for first contact. This version is brilliant in its deceptiveness. First, it contains an element of truth, which makes it plausible. Yes, Atlas is artificial. Yes, they are going to the moon because of it. Second, it portrays the system in a heroic light. They are not thieves, not liars. They are brave diplomats, preparing for the most important conversation in human history. Secrecy in this context seems justified. You can't cause a panic prematurely. And third, And most importantly, this version diverts attention from the real object of interest. It makes everyone look at Atlas, at the approaching ship, and no one looks at what has been lying on the moon for decades. They have substituted the target. Instead of the lunar beacon, the target becomes Atlas itself. It's a classic magician's trick, waving one hand to distract from what the other is doing. And we, like many others, fell for this trick. We thought we had uncovered their secret, but in reality, we were just following the path they had laid out for us. They wanted us to connect the race and Atlas. They just didn't expect us to dig deeper and find Lunicod 2. Now let's go back to that very first event one more time, to what we called the Trickster event, the global GPS failure, the Great Silence. We thought it was either a side effect of the Atlas engine or a drill by the system. But now, in light of this new information, a third, even more sinister version presents itself. What if the failure was a demonstration? What if it wasn't a side effect and it wasn't a drill? What if it was Atlas itself sending us a signal? Not a radio signal. A different kind of signal. It was like a battleship entering a harbor, giving a short blast from its horn to get all the little boats out of its way. It was a show of force, a short, painless, but absolutely unambiguous reminder of who is in charge here. Atlas showed us that it could, if it wanted to, shut down our entire fragile digital civilization in a second. It didn't attack us. It just put a hand on our shoulder and said, "I know you're here. I know about your plans. And I am watching." In this interpretation, the GPS failure wasn't chaos. It was a message, the first message of first contact. And this message was not addressed to humanity. It was addressed directly to the SEPI committee. It was Atlas's response to their frenzy, to their moon race. It told them, "Your games are amusing, but don't forget who makes the rules." And the system heard this message and was terrified because they realized they were not dealing with a soulless automaton flying on a program. They were dealing with a mind, an intelligence that sees right through them, and only now does the whole picture come together. Returning to the beginning gives us a new, shocking understanding. The moon race was launched by the system as a cover operation to steal the artifact. To do this, they created a controlled conspiracy theory linking the race to the arrival of Atlas. But Atlas, in turn, detected their preparations and responded by causing a global GPS failure, not as an attack, but as a warning. And the system, having received this warning, is now trapped. They can't back down now. The race has started. The rockets are being built. Public expectations are high. But to continue with their original plan, the theft, has become insanely dangerous. They know they are being watched by a power capable of neutralizing them. What do? They continue the show. They continue to talk about resources and science. They continue to prepare the missions. But their internal plan has likely changed. Now it's not just a theft. It's a reconnaissance in force. They will send their people and robots to the moon to probe the adversary, to see how it reacts to their approach to the artifact. It's a desperate, almost suicidal game of chicken with a higher intelligence. And we, all of humanity, are hostages in this game. We are sitting in the stadium stands, thinking we're watching a football game, while on the field, disguised as players, two bomb disposal experts are trying to defuse a bomb they brought themselves. And only now do we understand why the Hera mission is so important to them. It's not just Plan B. It's their only way of seeing what's really happening on the field. While all attention is focused on the lunar landing, Hera, their spy in deep space, will be the only one who can impartially record Atlas's reaction. She is their life insurance policy. And for us, she is the last thread, the last hope of knowing the truth before it all ends. The return to the beginning did not bring us peace. It only showed that the abyss on whose edge we stand is much deeper than we thought, and we are already taking our final step. And so, here we are, at the end of a long, winding road that has taken us through dusty archives, the cold depths of space, and the dark corridors of power. We have gathered all the evidence. We have connected all the dots. We have built a picture of reality that is as logical as it is monstrous. And now that the analyst's work is seemingly done, the most difficult stage begins. The stage of comprehension. Because the knowledge we have gained is not a trophy to be proudly displayed on a shelf. It is a burden, a heavy, cold weight that we must now carry. This is what philosophers call tragic knowledge. A clear, unclouded understanding of a catastrophe that you are powerless to prevent. It is the state of a person standing on the shore, watching a giant tsunami rise on the horizon, while everyone else on the beach continues to laugh, play, and build sandcastles. You can scream, you can wave your arms, but no one will hear you. Or worse, they will hear you, but they won't believe you. And you're left with only one thing to do, to stand and watch, knowing what is about to happen. It's a feeling of deep, existential isolation. The world around us hasn't changed. People still hurry to work, discuss the latest news, plan their vacations. On television screens, the great show called The New Moon Race continues. Experts pontificate on the advantages of different types of rocket engines. Politicians deliver pompous speeches about the future of humanity in space. Children dream of becoming astronauts, and there is not a shred of deceit in any of it. These people are sincere. They believe in the reality they are shown. And you, possessing your knowledge, become a stranger at this celebration of life. You become an internal exile in your own world. Every news report, every conversation, every smile of ignorance from those around you echoes within you as a dull ache. You see the matrix. You see the code behind the illusion. But you are forced to pretend that you only see the illusion itself, so as not to be taken for a madman. This knowledge poisons simple joys. You look at the clear night sky, at the scattering of stars, and you no longer feel a romantic thrill. Instead, you see the bars of an invisible prison. You see the cold, all-seeing eye of the observers. You see the dark forest full of silent hunters. The beauty of the universe is replaced by its horror, and you are alone with this horror. With isolation comes a sense of immense, unbearable responsibility. Because now that we know, we can't just turn away and forget. We have become accomplices. We are witnesses to a crime in the making. And silence makes us complicit. But what can we do? We've already tried. We tried to get through to the system, to the media, to the public, and we saw how its immune system works. Any attempt to break the information blockade will either be ignored, discredited, or drowned in noise. We are a handful of people with laptops against a global machine for producing and controlling reality. Any direct action on our part is doomed to fail. We can publish another report, release another video, but the Oracle is already waiting. It will label us as conspiracy theorists, and 99% of people will walk right by, without even looking at the substance of our evidence. We find ourselves in a classic zugzwang, a situation where any move we make only worsens our position. To act is to be informationally destroyed. To do nothing is to betray our own conscience. It's a paralyzing feeling. You possess knowledge that could change the world, but you have no lever to apply that knowledge. You are like Cassandra, who sees the fall of Troy, but whose prophecies no one believes. And all you can do is watch as the wooden horse is rolled through the gates of your city. And what do we see as we watch? We see the system continuing its performance with growing confidence. Preparations for the lunar missions are in full swing, But now, with our knowledge, we see in these preparations what others do not. We see the double meaning. Here is NASA testing the new lunar rover Viper, designed to search for water at the South Pole. But we, having studied its technical specifications, see that its main instrument is not a drill, but a highly sensitive magnetometer and a neutron spectrometer, perfectly suited for finding and analyzing the beacon itself. Here is China launching another relay satellite, Kuekiao-2, to provide communication with the far side of the moon, officially for future scientific missions. But we, having analyzed its orbit, see that it is perfectly calibrated to provide continuous communication specifically with the region where the anomaly is located, while remaining in shadow from observers on Earth. Every action they take, which on the surface looks like a logical step in space exploration, is, at a deeper level, a stage in the preparation for a covert operation. They are not just building rockets, they are building the infrastructure for their gamble. And the world applauds them, not realizing they are applauding the builders of their own scaffold. And what about our protagonist, 3i Atlas? It continues its inexorable flight. It has already crossed the orbit of Mars. Every day it gets brighter. Amateurs like Chris Green continue to track it, and their data confirms it is not deviating from its course. It is still making its micro-maneuvers. It is still flying towards the rendezvous point. But in the official reports, there is not a word of this. The system continues to call it a comet. They publish beautiful images taken by the JWST showing its coma and say, "Look at this amazing natural beauty." But they never publish the raw spectral analysis data. They never comment on its braking maneuver at Jupiter. They have created an information cocoon around it, allowing only information that confirms their legend to escape. They are behaving like someone who has found a tiger shark in their garden but tells everyone it's just a very large goldfish and asks them not to get too close, so as not to scare it. And the scariest part is, people believe them, because the truth is too inconvenient, too big. It doesn't fit into the frame of everyday consciousness. It's much easier to believe in a comet than to believe that a judge from the depths of the galaxy is flying towards us. So what is left for us? In this paralysis of will, in this isolation, in this tragic knowledge, we are left with one single final role, the role of guardians, of chroniclers. We cannot stop the tsunami, but we can build a lighthouse that might survive the disaster and tell future generations, if there are any, what really happened. Our task now is not to shout, but to document, to collect every fact, every screenshot, every crumb of data, to create an encrypted, decentralized archive that the system cannot destroy. We must become the shadow historians of this invisible war. We must preserve the memory, because when it's all over, the victors, whoever they may be, will write their own version of history. And our only hope is that somewhere, in the depths of the network, another version will remain. Ours, the honest one. We see the strings. We see the choreography. But the puppet master remains in the shadows. And the most terrifying question is not, what happens next? But, are we next on his stage? Perhaps we are already on it. And our role in this play is to be the ones who know, but remain silent. To be the chorus in an ancient Greek tragedy, commenting on the actions of the heroes but unable to change their fate. This knowledge is our cross to bear, and we will carry it to the end. We will watch, we will record, and we will wait. Wait for the day when silence becomes impossible, even if we have to speak upon the ruins of our world. And so the curtain falls. But the play is not over. The ending remains unwritten. We have walked this entire path with you, from the first vague suspicion to a terrifying crystal clarity. We started with a simple question about the strange rush to the moon and ended on the threshold of a new cosmic era whose rules are not written by us. Let's go over the key points of our investigation one last time, not to repeat, but to reinforce, to cast this fragile construction of facts and hypotheses into a solid, unbreakable monolith of knowledge that you will take with you. It all began with an anomaly, a dual anomaly. On one side, a sudden, universal, and inexplicable moon fever. The US, China, Russia, India, all the world powers, forgetting their differences, rushed to our satellite, hiding behind vague promises of resources and scientific discoveries. On the other side, the appearance in our system of a mysterious interstellar visitor, 3I Atlas, whose behavior from the very beginning did not fit the usual models. The official version stated, "These are two unrelated events, a simple coincidence." But we know that in the world of high stakes, there are no coincidences. There's only well-planned or poorly planned choreography. Our first breakthrough came when we discovered the hidden goal of this race. All of them, while pretending to fly to different points, were actually aiming for one single, unremarkable region on the far side of the moon. A region devoid of any apparent value. The official explanation, optimal landing conditions, crumbled to dust at the first check. This was the first layer of lies we peeled back. Then we dove into the archives and found a ghost, Lunicod 2, a forgotten Soviet robot that before its mysterious demise back in 1973 drove along the very edge of this region, and its instruments, as we discovered from miraculously preserved telemetry, recorded the impossible. A brief but monstrously powerful spike in the magnetic field and radiation. It wasn't a malfunction. It wasn't a solar storm. It was proof. Something is sleeping there, in the lunar dust. Something possessing colossal energy. And this fact became the key that allowed us to connect the two pieces of the puzzle. We analyzed the trajectory of 3I Atlas, discarding the official version of outgassing. We saw in its movement not chaos, but intelligence. A series of precise, calculated maneuvers. And when we extrapolated this intelligent trajectory into the future, our computers gave us an answer that made our hearts stop. Atlas is not just flying past the moon. It is flying to the specific, forgotten magnetic anomaly. The new moon race is not a competition. It is a desperate attempt to steal an ancient artifact from the meeting point of two extraterrestrial forces. We went further and performed an autopsy on the visitor itself. We saw that beneath its cometary shell lay not rock, but technology, an industrial alloy, a magnetoplasmic propulsion system running on the solar wind, an onboard intelligence capable of the most complex gravitational maneuvers. Atlas is not a comet. It is a probe, and its mission, as our calculations showed, does not end at the moon. It is going to stay, to take up an observation post in Earth's orbit. We understood the system's motives. It's not malice. It's fear. Fear of its own population's panic, fear of a rival's technological superiority, and most of all, fear of the unknown. This fear forces them to lie, to hide, to manipulate. They are not omnipotent puppet masters. They are just as frightened as we are, only they have much larger and more dangerous toys in their hands. We saw the global architecture of concealment, the forgotten WOW signal, which came from the same sector of the sky as Atlas, the pre-written Geneva Protocols, legalizing the withholding of information about contact, the global GPS failure, which was not an accident, but a show of force, a message from Atlas. And we found the conductor of this orchestra of silence, the secret SEP committee at the UN. And finally, we peered into the existential abyss that this mystery opens up. We hypothesized that the great silence of the cosmos is not the absence of life, but the result of a galactic quarantine maintained by ancient observers. And humanity, with its clumsy and selfish race, risks violating this quarantine and attracting the attention of the sanitizers of this cosmic order. This is where we stand today. We possess knowledge, but are deprived of power. We see the truth, but cannot prove it in a way that would make people believe us. We are witnesses, but our testimony will not be taken into account. So what is left for us? What is left is what we started with. Observation. We will continue to watch. We will watch the lunar missions, looking for any deviations from the official plans in their telemetry. We will watch the Hera mission, which has become our spy in the enemy's camp. We will watch Three-Eye Atlas, whose approach becomes more obvious with each passing day. And we will watch the system, its statements, its silence, because it is in the pauses, in what is not said, that the most important information usually lies. Our investigation is not over. It has entered a new phase, a phase of vigilant waiting. We cannot predict what exactly will happen. There are too many variables. Will they get to the artifact? How will Atlas react? Will the observers intervene? Any of these scenarios leads to a future that will be radically different from our present. But one thing we know for sure. The curtain is up, the pieces are on the board, and the game has already begun. And you, those who have watched this to the end, will now have to live with this knowledge too. You are no longer just spectators, you are seekers. And now it's your turn to ask questions. Don't trust simple answers. Analyze the data, connect the dots, keep watching. Because in the months and years to come, the truth will not be in the headlines. It will be in the noise, in the anomalies, in the very missing files that you and I have learned to find. The hunt for the truth continues, and we are glad that you are now with us. Watch our back, and watch the skies closely.